Greetings all, and welcome to another Wu-Sabat Outformation Class UK. We are the United Sabians worldwide, and this class is being brought to you out of all eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. Thank you for the introduction, Manthu Ba'h Kebab. My name is Nabab Kakni Hess, and I'm a student teacher of the Master Teacher, bringing to you today Lost Records of Time Revisited, which is one of the actual fact series you can see on the screen, number 20. So we're just revisiting some of the topics of that and bringing that more up to date, or making sure people understand it, and then going into the Tulli Papyrus. So we're combining those two sets of classes together. I think this was initially probably going to be a 2-3-parter, but based on the detail, we're probably likely to go up to 4 parts, maybe maximum. So next month we'll still be covering these same 2 topics, just because we're just going over a few things just to make sure the basic level of understanding of some of the astronomy and some of the science stuff, all understand it before we get into the real nub and detail. So let me just move this on. So just going to do a couple of polls just to make sure that you can hear us okay in terms of a sound check. So sound check first. Can you hear my voice clearly over the OWN? If you're on Facebook, you won't be able to see this sound check. But if you are on the Zoom platform, if you can just say vote in the affirmative or the negative, you may need to swipe right or left, depending on your device, just to make sure that you can see the questions. So can you hear me okay over the OWN chart? If you cannot, then please put some comments in the chat. We'll do our best to see how we can support you. So can I be heard clearly over the OWN chart? Can I give a few more seconds to answer that question? Okay, all right, moving on. So this is just a visual check. So can you see the presentation on the screen clearly? So same in the affirmative or the negative. Okay, great stuff. So those are the polls. Just reduce that down. So just bear with me. Okay, so what we're going to do in the first instance is just start the class off in cultural fashion. This is a Sabian so esoteric or spiritual chant known as Partakia, the affirmation. So I'm going to read that in our native language, Misbatia or Sabaic in English equivalent, and then I'll translate that into English for the proper understanding. Adoy kale namazwarat wufakur ame kasam un empa paut anuki jawef pa ashuk empa paut wu kale ashuk kawun jawef neya anuki kasam un empa paut wu pa paut kawun kasam un em neya anuki wahu ame pa paut wu pa paut kawun wahu ame neya nakuk kadur Najo ame kasam un empa paut wu khabub ame mushachas un nakuk kadur kawan kale afef nakuk tayur jawef pa paut ame wase ameh dayarni kawun lakei bakoe jawef pa paut anuki abed be nafashni pa paut kawun anuki pa paut kadur nakuk kadur pa paut amul nakuk amul. So we said begin all prayers and thinking as a part of all, and then we said I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as a part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is, I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was an affirmation referred to as Partakia. So moving on now to the induction for those who may be joining us for the first time, welcome. And basically just take you through the Zoom platform. So I noticed somebody had mentioned that they can't hear properly. Well, what we probably need to do is just adjust your audio settings here on the left, just to make sure you selected the right device. So if you need to make any changes, that's the place to do it. You've obviously got 3 options here, or sort of icons: chat, raise hand, and question answer. If you're sending any message into the chat, basically for messages or feedback that's not questions, then please select panelists and all participants. That just basically means everybody, or no, excuse me, I think they've changed the options now. Select everyone. Yeah, select everyone, and that basically means that everybody can hear what you're changing. I'll update these. It's just been a new update, it seems, of the what you're looking at in terms of the application of Zoom itself. If you've got questions, please ask questions. Don't sit there in ignorance. We're going through a lot of scientific things today, so if you don't understand something or it's not clear, then ask questions to help me to make it clear, rather than you just sit there and be confused. That's not the purpose of what we're doing here today. The purpose here is to obviously bring clarity and be able to answer your questions clearly, and if that's not the case, you need to provide us with feedback so we can give you the best answer to the question as best as within our knowledge and capabilities. Now, so if you want to ask a question, simply raise your hand, and at certain points in the class I'll come to either the facilitator, or today a bit short-handed, so I may look into the just to see in the chat, see if hands have been raised. So just to, if you've got a question, that means you come live, ask me the question direct, and I'll do my best to answer your question here today. What will happen is when you raise your hand and we come to you, we'll just mention a part of your name just to bring it to your attention. You'll see a message saying host would like to unmute, and then you need to unmute yourself in order to be able to speak. If you've dialed in, which I don't think we do have any dial-ins, but if you have dialed in, then *9 to raise your hand, and then *6 when prompted to mute and unmute your phone. Once you are given that ability, you have it permanently for the rest of the call. So if you could just make sure that your phone stays on mute as to not disturb the rest of the class proceedings. Now, if you do not want to come live verbally, then you have to, again, just ask the question. You can do it in written form by pressing this icon here to the right, and you can just say, do your question verbally. Either for today, either Manthu, if he's available, he will ask the question on your behalf, or I will, in this instance, look at it, read it out, and then answer the question again as well. Yeah, so 2 ways to answer questions, either verbally or written at any point during the session today. So we periodically have poll questions and recap quizzes, and you'll be pleased to know that we have one today to start off the class. And unfortunately, for everybody. It only allows 10 questions at a time, so I've kept it to 10 questions. I was thinking about doing a bit more, but we'll keep it to 10 questions for today. So those will be based primarily on part 1. So if you wasn't here for part 1, no problem. Do your best guess. It's anonymous, so don't need to feel a way about it being recorded with your name, etc., etc. Okay, let's get started. Lot to get through today. So I'm doing a short introduction. If you do want to know more about us, let me just go back. In fact, there is a new website in test, United Sabians Worldwide. So you can go there, or you can visit us, the UK site, unw-online-uk.org. You're going to find more information about who we are, etc. You can go to these sites, and obviously we've got the Facebook page there as well. If you're on Facebook, you won't be able to ask questions directly into the chat. You need to come to the Zoom platform to do that. So not monitoring. You can put the questions there, but we're not monitoring that directly all the time while the class is going on. So it may be that if we can't get to it, then we'll answer it after the class has taken place. If you do want the full interactive experience, then by all means feel free to click the link and come into the Zoom platform. But equally, if you're happy to stay on Facebook, it's not a problem on that side of things either. Okay, so just a short introduction, and then we'll get into the details. Visit our YouTube channel if you want to find out what took place in part 1 to get a basic understanding. Let's say a short recap, but then we're going to get into the detail of today's class, so a lot of information to cover. So who is the master teacher? Well, the reason why I refer to him as the master teacher, because he's a master at teaching. You're not going to know that unless you obviously put it to the test, and that's taking the 1,000 or so plus books that he's written over the course since, I suppose, 1963 up to today, and putting them to the test, you understand, of his own mantra of "Don't believe me, check it out." Taking those books apart, really researching, going into the detail, etc., to see, and the many lectures, etc., that he's done to see whether that title holds true. It's true for us as Sabians who have put that work in, but as I say, if you just join us for the first time, then that's what it means, a master at teaching. Understood? Sometimes the term is used, I see it used in music. Some certain songs and various different things. Not to say there's not other master teachers, but sometimes the term is used without proper understanding. So it's a master of teaching. Now, it's important, as I say, when we are dealing with leaders or teachers, to do a research into their genealogy, and oftentimes we don't give credit, certainly on the feminine or sacred feminine or female side of things. So Dr. Malachi Z York's mother, or the master teacher we affectionately call him, mother is Mary Abba York, so she was known as Fatima, and so important to give credit. So that mitochondrial line that was chosen in this regard was hers, and she crafted and gave birth to Dr. Malachi Z York. Transitioned on August 4th, 2012. And she, so was the original clan mother, I suppose, of the tribe. And this is her in our clan mother attire of the United Sabians Worldwide culture and our tribal identity as Yamasee Native Americans, but obviously our origin is also as Africans, so known today, as I say, as Sabians. Tying into the Sirius star constellation. So this is her in the clan mother attire, and by tradition, Kim Mamta Mutpataret Atum Araye, her daughter, is the clan mother that we currently have in this day and time. Maybe next time I'll put a picture of her up as well. So that transition has followed the mitochondrial line, as we are a matriarchal as opposed to patriarchal people, naturally in line with natural nature. His father was Al-Hadi Abdur Rahman Al-Mahdi, birth date 1922. Unfortunately, he was assassinated in 1970. As I say, come from a very prominent and significant family, and this is where he gets the Sudanese heritage. He was born in Takoradi, Ghana, which is in West Africa. From his father's side, he gets that Sudanese heritage and tie-in, and as I say, he was the grandson of a more significant person, I suppose, recorded in our Sajalat records as Sayyid Muhammad Ahmed al-Mahdi, in the son of 1845, so known as the Mahdi, and then crossed over, some say, 1885. Yeah, so significant lineage there, and tying back to Egypt by way of that lineage. Now, as we've explained previously in this class, and if you join us for the first time, you may not be familiar with how our story gets renewed. So in our story as first world people, our ancestors in-house vehicles or vessels, and in different cultures they have different names. So in Islam it's referred to as an Mutajasid. In Hinduism they refer to as avatar. In ancient Egypt, that vessel or vehicle was referred to as the Amun Bab Rei Akhtar Pahanut Jedwi, understand, or Jedwi, excuse me, who is also known as Tahuti. So that was a vehicle or a vessel for our ancestors to be able to speak to us, to convey the necessary information that we need for aid our transformation from mortals back into deities again, or supreme beings in this day and time. So between the first half an hour symbolically, and we'll get into that in this class today, so that in order to bring us from ignorance into an understanding, or breaking the first spell, dealing with really the religious schools, that first combination from 1970 down to 2006 was in the form of Imam Isa, or Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, as he was known then. This is a picture of him at age 25. He was in-housed by being referred to as El Khadir, the Green One, and this was up until 2006, where 1996, excuse me, not 2006, 1996, with the release of the Holy Tablets, a book that was the bridge between religion and reality, taking us, out of the spell casting monotheistic religions to remove the spell from us. And so a new combination was necessary to bring us into the information that we're dealing with today, actual facts, Partarak, which means the way, or guidance, and master secrets. Yeah, so us really now starting to get back into our culture, with not necessarily having to rely on the books of faith and belief that we had maybe been raised upon, but unfortunately had polluted our minds in comparison to the original factual teachings in our spiritual doctrine based on natural nature, yeah, as animists. So the new combination was needed. Dr. Malachi Z could be in York Okran, and in-housed by being referred to today as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, and so a direct link, who the ancient Egyptians referred to as the Parnatharu. That wasn't their name. That word means overseers, or the overseers, but that wasn't their name. Their name is Morzaku, yeah, the Morzaku, or the providers, understood, who claim, or make the claim, as I say, that they created the universe that we are currently in, and created the Negroid race as their children. You understand? So us as ancient Egyptians referred to them as Parnatharu, or the overseers. That's where the English word nature in actuality comes from, and our perception of them, or how we saw them, was suns, yeah, S-U-N, suns, like the one you see 93 million miles away from the Earth, which we'll be discussing in great detail today. So Dr. Malachi Z York, or the master teacher, comes in a line of obviously many great teachers that we have had over this last age in particular, and each one of them come in, I suppose, with a piece of the story necessary to bring us, as you see from the top, from ignorance back into factual thinking again, because the new spirituality, certainly in this day and time, is facts, factual information. The science, each of the different races on the planet have their own spiritual science, and one of the roles that the master teacher informed us that was his job was to bring that back, you understand, to resurrect that lost culture, to set the record straight effectively and bring us back that spiritual science. Now, the spiritual science that all races have enable them to unify mentally first, and then the physical unity follows. So one of the things that people often accuse us as Nagarnadu or Negroids is that we're not unified, understood? And one of the issues, or the main issue why that is the case, is because we are all in different religious ideologies. You understand? Everybody else's ideology other than our own. And not to get into that in too much detail today, but you have to understand, and that's no disrespect to anybody who is of those cultures, but they are set up in a way that causes a person to be subservient to other races. So if you think about the primary visual images of Mosesism, which is Judaism today or whatever, it's not a Negroid image. If you think of the primary images of Christianity today, and you think of who they are saying is a divine, etc., it's not a Negroid image. If you think of Islam today, which we call it Mohammedism, because the central character in that religion is Muhammad, it's based around his movements, life, so on and so forth, his sunnah, way of life, so on and so forth. And you look at the primary images there, they're not Negroid in origin. Understood? So it sets an individual up, us in this case, to be second-class citizens, understood, in those monotheistic religions. And the first world people were not Christians, they was not Muslims, and they were certainly not Jews, understood, in that regard. And so scientific evidence today, paleontology, archaeology, finding those bones, or say the oldest bones, are found in Africa today, and well past the 6,000 year chronology of his story when we step into his story, and obviously now when we're getting some understanding of time, where it even goes back further than that, to where there was no even classification of years, months, days, so on and so forth in that regard. Understood? So we have our story goes back millions, if not billions of years, and as I say, but we have constrained our mind and been forced, I suppose, into interpreting what been classified as divinity, or really nature, the universe, through the lens really of the imagination of the men of monotheism. And I say men specifically because it wasn't women who translated any of these so-called holy books. So they don't even have the originals today. And I say it colours the way in which we think and observe, as I say, the universe around us. A very important statement, say, don't make me holy so you can find holes in me. So he's not a holy man. As he always said, he is a teacher, but obviously because of religion, we put certain of our own judgments on these situations, how certain people have to behave and conduct themselves, so on and so forth. And oftentimes this is used as a tactic to bring down certainly Nagarnadu or black leaders in this regard, using the sex force oftentimes a tactic. But if you study the history and story of even the people that we're seeing here, oftentimes it didn't end well. So if it didn't end in death for individuals or dying poor, dying of old age was a pretty much a luxury. So constantly under attack if they were considered to be a threat, but nonetheless made significant contributions. And in the case of Dr. Malachi Z, still making major contributions to dealing with, as I say, as you can see on the screen, the resurrection of our people still in this day and time. All right, so say brief introduction. Let's get into it. It's got a lot to cover today. So let's see where we were at. Spare me 1 second. Okay, so let's do a quick recap quiz. So if you're on the Zoom platform, I'm going to launch a poll. There's 10 questions. So just do your best to answer that. I'm launching that poll now. If you're on Facebook, what I'm going to do, because you can't see those questions, so basically just answer the questions. It's multiple choice. Just pick the answer that is appropriate, I suppose, or closest to what you think it is, and then we'll go through the answers together afterwards, just as a bit of a recap. And I'll go through, for Facebook, because you can't see that, I'll go through what they are on the screen, and I'll give you a few, maybe a minute or so, just to answer those. So again, just put the question down, and then what you think is the answer based on what you see as the options on the screen. So the first question is, what is the original etymological meaning of the word influence? So these are subjects, etc., all from part 1. That's just to get us back into where we are before we get into the session today. So options are flu, epidemic, visitation, influence of the stars, visitation, or to be ill, as in unwell. Yeah, so not ill like fly or anything in that regard, but ill as in unwell. So 30 seconds or so to make a choice on that one. If you're on Facebook, as I say, just put the question number and the answer in the chat there in Facebook. Okay, so if you've selected an answer on there, if you're on Zoom, just move through your own time. Okay, next one. Let's see the next answer is here. Okay, next question. So, question 2. So, what is the main difference between the drawings? I should probably say in the center, but in the center of the astrological map of the zodiac and the Dendora star map. So what is the main difference between the drawings in the center of the astrological map of the zodiac and the Dendora star map? So potential answers are the removal of the sun and moon, no difference, the map originally came from Africa, the removal of the woman as the hippopotamus deity, Patarat, the removal of the sacred, I should say, symbol representing a black hole. I should probably say sacred, not scared. Sacred symbol representing a black hole. So give you about 30 seconds to make a choice on that one. All right, okay, let's go to question 3. Here we go. What is the quality? So what is the quality? So very important. We've got certain concepts in Wu-Sabat. So what is the quality? So the answers, potentially is question 3. What are the answers here? So 4 phases of the moon, 4 phases of the sun when viewed from Earth, the 4 seasons, 4 in 1. That a woman can be a woman, a daughter, a mother, and a grandmother, 4 in 1 principle. So again, it's a few seconds to answer question number 3. Okay, moving on then to question 4. Let's see where we're at with that. Question 4, yeah. Okay, so choose question 4. Choose the option that completes the following verse from Partakia by way of the time, verse 9. So basically these question marks here represent a missing word. Understood? So here we've got missing word second, missing word, then hour, comma, day, missing word, month, and then missing word, missing word. So options are first, second, third, hour, day, fortnight, month, century, millennium. Second option, moment, second, third, hour, day, fortnight, month, century, millennium. Third answer, moment, second, minute, hour, day, week, month, century, millennium. Or the fourth answer is moment, second, minute, hour, day, week, month, year, generation. So again, give you a few seconds just to answer that. Okay, moving on. Question 5. What is the source of the rules of natural nature? I should say natural nature, excuse me. Natural nature by which Sabians, Negroids live by. So I should say natural nature, not natural. Natural nature. So what is the source of the rules of natural nature by which Sabians, Negroids live by? Options are existence, the all, Partakia. Yeah, existence, the all, or Partakia. Yeah, a few seconds to make those choices. Okay, so moving on then. So, question 6. This is again for those on Facebook. What are the rules of existence? Let's make that a bit clearer. So, the rules of existence. So, options are, it's question 6. What are the rules of existence? The rules that things exist. The rules of being, becoming, became. The rules of is, of, and are. Okay, so the rules that things exist, the rules of being, becoming, became, the rules of is, of, and are. So again, a few seconds to answer that question. Okay, moving on then to question 7. What is the purpose of is of are? What is the purpose of is of are? Potential answer number 1, to be. Second answer, to exist. Third option, is of are. And the last option there, are of is. Okay, so to be, to exist, is of are of is. Again, a few seconds to answer that question. Okay, moving on then to question 8. Let's go down. So, complete the following sequence of equivalents in understanding time. So, past, present, future, there, here, there, and then what is it? So, the next sequence, is it now, then now, or the time is now, free as one, or then now, then? So, is it now, then now, the time is now, free as one, or then now, then? So again, a few seconds to answer that, and we'll get into the last 2 questions. Okay, moving to question 9. What is the master of time? So what is the master of time? Options: Yaanuwn. Option 2, Yaanuwn Tat. Option 3, Tahuti. Option 4, the pituitary gland. Option 5, the pineal gland. Option 6, the hypothalamus gland. So option 1, Yaanuwn. 2, Yaanuwn Tat. 3, Tahuti. 4, pituitary gland. 5, pineal gland or pineal gland. And then 6, hypothalamus gland. So again, a few seconds to answer that question. And then moving on to the final question. Oops. Question number 10. Yaanuwn Tat represents what? Option 1, the opposite of Yaanuwn, darkness. Option 2, option 3, the black sun. Option 4, the invisible. Okay, so opposite of Yaanuwn, darkness, the black sun, or the invisible. Okay, so we need 1 more minute on all platforms to answer those questions. In fact, let me leave that on the screen. So, answer those questions. So on Facebook, drop some comments in the chat, and obviously Zoom, just complete those. So you've got 1 more minute to get through those 10 questions, and we'll go for the answers. Okay, so people just getting the fine. I'll give you just a quick few more seconds. Just get those answers in. Okay, right. So let me end this poll and share the results on the screen. Okay, I've got to remember the answers to these now. Okay, so what was the original etymological meaning of the word influence? Yeah, probably a bit tricky, this one. Yeah, the actual answer there, so Etimo online, is the third answer here, visitation, influence of the stars. So we were making the point, isn't it, if you remember, that basically the word influenza and the word influencer, they're very close phonetically, and the fact that of how, as I say, today a lot of our influence is being taken from, you know, fake stars, understood, in the Hollywood set, so to speak, you know, television, reality television now, and influencers on social media, taking us away from the natural influence that should be from the stars by way of astronomy, do you understand, or really true astrology. Yeah, so obviously you've got astro, which means astronomy is a combination of astro, which means stars, and then nomi or nomia from nomos, which means law. So the law, I suppose, that governs the space that the stars occupy in that regard. That's what astronomy is dealing with, versus astrology, which is dealing with star, but it's dealing with the effect on, I suppose, personalities, etc. here on Earth, understood? So really we should be getting back, or should be being influenced by a combination of those two. And when I say astrology, I don't mean zodiac, understand? But we're talking about our star, sort of 93 million miles away. That's what should be influencing, or should be our focus today. And because of ignorance, we pay little or no attention to many of those bodies, not in any meaningful kind of way. Okay, so question number 2 was, what is the main difference between the drawings in the center of the astrological map of the zodiac and Dendora star map? So most popular option here was number 3, and that is correct. Yeah, so again, a little bit of a tricky one there. But yeah, so the removal, when you compare those maps, they either have nothing in the center of their zodiac, a sort of star map, or in some cases you see a star, or you might see the moon, or a combination of the two, whatever. And what they removed effectively was the female, that 13th point. Because even if you think about, say, which we will get into in other parts, it's about 12 tribes of Israel, 12 tribes of Ishmael. From their biblical records, for example, they often forget about the 13th tribe of Israel, for example, Dinah. Yeah, so the 13th is that center position, and on our star map you saw the female there represented as Pataret. Understood? The hippopotamus deity, obviously symbolic of a pregnant female. And also goes into the next question, which is number 3. What is the quadrity? So one of the things that's important for us in learning about Wu-Sabat is that we have our own definitions of things, and part of these classes is that we have to, I suppose, get into the mind of the master teacher, because all this outformation that's being given to us in the form of information, we have certain concepts that have to be understood from the ancient ones. They have nothing to do with biblical understanding or Quranic understanding. Those were obviously necessary for a certain point in time, you understand, to aid our knowledge and to remove the spell. And obviously you recognize that part of that, the misinformation or the poison in an antidote you give, part of the cure is to give people obviously part of the poison. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's what was happening. You understand? Take what was bad information, you make it good information and made it useful for a certain time period. But if you were coming in now, I don't know, as a young person or somebody older just coming across it for the first time, unless you've been raised in those particular doctrines, not necessarily, you don't need to necessarily go through all of that to understand what we're talking about right here and now. In fact, it's of little or no value unless you're speaking to people who are coming from that. You need to sort of, speak to them on their level, so to speak, not in a patronizing way, but just in terms of their understandings, in order to be able to walk them back as we were walked back, with a level of patience and understanding to take us back to where we are today in ancient Egypt doctrine. So quality is a principle, again, that of one of many that needs to be understood. So popular answer is the correct one, so it's 71%, that a woman can be a woman, a daughter, a mother, and a grandmother at the same time. You understand? So this 4-in-1 principle, again, that you see in nature. Seasons, there's 4, but it's really 1. Do you understand? 4 phases of the moon, it's really 4, but it's 1. Do you understand? Depend from a certain perspective. Do you understand? So this is exceptionally important. And you see 3-in-1, 4-in-1. So understand that us as Sabians, obviously we are numerologists, so we're interested in science of numbers and symbolism behind it as it relates to our culture. We are factologists, so certainly interested in facts for that. Mental clarity, unity, and then the physical unity follows. And then we are ontologists, so we're interested in the source of where things come from, particularly as animists. You understand that view that we came from a soul force first, you understand, energy before we materialized here into the physical. Okay, so question 4. Choose the option that completes the following verse from Partakia by way of the time, verse 9. And so we had a gap, second gap, hour, day, gap, month, and then 2 gaps. Yeah, so tie for this one. So let's see, let me widen this up so you see the answers. So we've got moment. So the answer here, or correct answer, is the 4th one. So moment, second, minute, hour, day, week, month, year, generation. Yeah, so we were talking about these points in time at the last class, and basically how I suppose you can create various different time systems here on the planet, but the sort of time frame, which is the circumference of the planet at 24,896 miles, varying up to maybe 902 miles. That needs to be a time frame. So depending on how you divide that up, is what time system you can put in place. And so the most important thing in there is that they missed out the second, isn't it? They missed out the moment, or first, as it's known as, out of their time. So not calculating that because they came along after, or second. So they're not calculating the rest, only the beat. And even then, as we showed you in the last class, or in part one, the reason why there's a lot of errors in time, the way it's calculated today, is because the event of rotation, where the planet is rotating on its own axis, it doesn't take 24 hours. It takes 23 hours, 56 minutes and 6 seconds. So there is basically a short fall there, which then has to be recalculated, isn't it, every year, where we have this leap year, where we have an extra day in the year to account for that. So there's a lot of problems, errors, with the way time is calculated today on a global scale, and it gives the idea that time, as I say, is moving in some form of direction because of the hour, or the hand, obviously, of the clock, moving around in a so-called clockwise direction. So we need to remove that understanding, because that's not what time is. Yeah, it's in relation to what we know it to be. So, question 5, what is the source of the rules of natural nature, that should say natural nature, second word, by which Sabians, Negroids live by? Okay, what was the answer to this one now? So, most people went for the all. Yeah, not far from the right answer, but the answer is existence. Yeah, so the source of the rules of natural nature, which is existence. That's the correct answer for 5. 6, the rules of existence. What are the rules of existence? People remember this very good. So majority answer here, 71%. The rules of existence are being, becoming, became. Understand? So very thought-provoking section when you read that, but the fact that it's challenging to understand means it's important. You understand? So you have to keep revisiting it and going back over it, because it's important. You understand? So you may even touch upon it again today, just for even extra clarity. So what is the purpose? Question 7, what is the purpose of is of are? Interesting. To be, to exist, is of are, and the correct answer is the last one. So one person got that right. Are of is. So the purpose of is of are is are of is. Understand? So is, as we were covering this last month, so is basically a thing or all things, and we are of is. Understand? So we are a thing as a being, you understand, which is the same as all things. So a thing and all things are the same. So when it's saying a thing and all things, because in that context, it's saying that we, you understand, we are of is. You understand? We are of is. You understand? Of is purpose, and then are is effectively, literally as it says, it's what we are, what we have become, or how we are, I suppose, can be defined almost in a sense, very loosely. But that world, isn't it, is the journey. When they say being, becoming, became, that journey, isn't it, is from nothingness to somethingness. Understood? So, and to maybe simplify it even further, it's the world of energy before we get to the world of matter or material. Do you understand? So there's a world, isn't it, that we can't see but can be perceived, you understand? And we're coming from that. Obviously their story focuses on the light, you understand? And we have ignored the darkness, but this is taking you now back into the origin. So time, the purpose of really us going through this is because it's to understand that time is. Their time is like all is. And time is coming from, I can't even use the word state, I have to be careful how I speak, but time is. Understood? So the same way we understand this concept that of stillness out of motion. Understood? Yeah, state of stillness first. Out of stillness, motion, things began to move. Understood? So basic energy, for example, you understand that concept where, difficult to understand the concept because you've got things that don't move and they don't impart any force or energy. But that gave birth to energy. In the same way, time is, but we know time because you've got age, movement, do you understand? Growth. Yeah? So that's how we know time is there, but time is not those things. Yeah, that's why it says by way of time or by way of the time. So time is. So getting us to go into this in more detail is getting us to understand that. The real, I'm saying not really important, but important thing is who are we in this context? Because I think one of the things that you realise from that Master Secret number 3 is how important we are as Nagaru. Do you understand? We're not even so, and it ties back into Partakia. Do you understand the initial affirmation? Because our perception of who we are. So over time, what's taking place is saying the Master obviously explained that we get moved off of our center. And I suppose in that context, what it's saying is that okay, well you are existence, you are all things. You are a thing, but you are all things. In saying you are existence, and you get moved off of your center because of growth. You understand? So, and that's basically because if we think about it as we've transitioned from being, becoming, became, we're now today seeing ourselves as individuals, aren't we? We've clung to name and form, body. We look in the mirror. This is who I am. Do you understand that kind of thing? And we've forgotten, our real origins. That's why it keeps saying, well, I'm a part of all is, part of me. I can see it as a part of all and failed as an individual person. So that perception of ourselves is where we're now, we're missing because we're not seeing ourselves as part of all. A part or where we can, and part and all things is the same. For us as Nagaru, it doesn't apply to everybody else because as supreme beings, obviously, we are part of existence. You understand? That's where our origins came from, or even the manifestation of those natural ether energies, you understand, to become obviously what we're looking at as today. So something that has to be sat on and contemplated. And time is of that. You understand? Time is, you know what I mean? Going all the way back. And so you can't even say it as an origin. It's always there. You just know it exists by way of age, things decline, they grow, so on and so forth. That's how you know time is there. And in the context of the birth of a universe or even this universe, because it has a point of origin, then you understand space, matter, and obviously time, because that universe now is going to grow, isn't it? And eventually die off, so on and so forth. So there's a point of origin within existence. Understand? So you know time is there because it has a starting and an end point. Understood? So hence why they say time is now. Yeah, because now, you know what I mean, it's past, present, and future existing all at the same time, which nicely gives us the answer to number 8, I suppose. So complete the following sequence of equivalents, understand of time: past, present, future, there, here, there. And so what was the answer here? Yeah, the majority of people got that right. So then, now, then. So time is it if you have to say is. So now is the time, you understand? Yeah. So, and then within that, you've got multiple thens, isn't it? You've got then of the past, it can be used as, or then of the future, all existing, you understand, or happening at the same time. So events. Yeah. So it's your understanding, okay, use this example a lot, but it's a good example. You know, class didn't start at 1:15, or you understand, class started when, hey, you know, I've clicked off the mute button and say, hey, well, greetings everybody. That's when time started. It started by way of the incident, not because the clock was running around, do you understand, in a circle, and then it hit a certain number. No, we're by way of that, that's just a thing to record it, so that, or method that's being used, isn't it? So that we, the royal we, you, I, everybody on this call or whatever, knows, you know what I mean, can use that as a method for us to sync together and come at a certain point in space. You understand? Because that would then mean that you don't miss anything. So in that time, we're using the classification in that way. But that's not what time is in that regard. You understand? It's just being, so that's our understanding. It's a step back even. And so it gives you understanding to say, okay, within this now, you can have different ways in which you're going to measure age, growth in that regard. And so you can create your own time system and think of, you know, clever ways in which to do that, which are not based on, you know, miscalculations of time. You understand? Because as we've expressed before, you know, you need to be within a certain range to make sure that certain events or incidents that are due to take place in nature, that you're ready for them. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so whatever system you use needs to be accurate enough to pick up, and sensitive enough to pick up whatever it is you're seeking to measure. And we have natural points in time of our own universe, but we don't use them, or we've let them go and replace them with fake time. So, for example, we know when a man has his first wet dream, when a woman has her first menstrual cycle, that is when this child becomes a male or female according to nature's clock. Now, it doesn't mean to say that, I mean, yeah, I can get a mortgage now and all that at 13. That doesn't mean that. But it's what nature is saying, hey, you're physically ready at least, or if you come, this transition is to become a man. Now there's certain things that you then start to build around a culture around nature's clock, don't you? So the next big stage of growth or development is at age 40. You understand? So that's when we become adults. Obviously at age 40, so from 40 to 80, that is adulthood. By the time we get then to 80 to 120, we're basically, if you make it to 80, or blessed enough to make it to 80, you're basically transitioning between the physical and the etheric world, you understand, between the two. And I was having a bit of a discussion about this last week in terms of gender. If you think about it, yes, and how we set up certain orders around those, do you know what I mean, then moments within the growth of the human body, because you think about it, okay, when you're a child and even when we're adults, we were separated into orders based on gender, you understand? But then when you get to the peak of those orders and get to the next level up, so for example, think about the highest order of the ancient Egyptian order, the true university, as we saw, I think in a previous class we looked at, called the Nine, you see that all of the nine, both male and female, they're dressed exactly the same. You understand? They're in the same outfits. And so if you think about that in the journey of the human body, men at a certain point, they start to become more feminine, and then women at a certain point start to become more masculine as they age. What do we mean by that? Does it mean men are wearing dresses? No, that's not our culture in that regard. What it means is that your testosterone levels in adulthood, obviously past 40, they start to what? They start to go down, don't they? As a female, your estrogen levels, they start to drop. So you're becoming more of a neutral being. It doesn't mean that you're not a man. It doesn't mean you're not female. You're just becoming more neutral, yeah, which is like we were originally, hermaphrodites, yeah, hermaphrodites. So you can see in our culture is based around nature's cycles, because we're always seeking, isn't it, to be in sync and in line with planetary. Do you understand? So, and that clock, even in nature's clock, as we know, as represented mathematically in the Fibonacci sequence that you see, which represents growth in nature. You know, look that up. So, you know, we've got 0, 1, 1, isn't it? Then 2, then 3. So the preceding two numbers, you add them together to get the next number in the cycle. We had a Fibonacci sequence, and that represents growth in nature. So nature's not always like, hey, 9 o'clock, this is going to happen. Sometimes it's going to happen at 9:03, 9:04. You understand? So in that regard, and so you have to. It's not precise in that way, and so it is precise insofar as the incident or event's going to happen. It's just not going to always happen on that date that you think it's going to happen. You understand? It can be one day after. So, but it's the incident that is key. Yeah. So, question number 9. What is the master of time? So here, interesting one. So based on part 1. So Yaanuwn was the most popular answer. Unfortunately, nobody got this one. The master of time, based on part 1, was the pineal gland. So the pineal gland is the master of time. And as we know, its ability or its vibrational qualities as the third eye for us obviously sinks us in to not only the universe that we're in, but the differentiation between the planes. You understand? Physical plane is 1, isn't it? Plane of force, spiritual plane, mental 4. You understand? Plane of divine truth, plane of divine reality, so on and so forth. So it enables us to differentiate between those, but you have to have obviously understanding, because the nutational rate of the composite atoms within a plane, they vibrate at a certain rate. So, and then everything, irrespective of size, you understand, atoms, planets, etc., all on the physical plane, for example, they all nutate at the same rate. So there's no power in the universe that can change that rate. But your pineal gland, obviously, in terms of our transformation, obviously can move between these different planes of existence. And as we expressed before, one of the characteristics of the incarnated master is that basically we contain all of the things, understood, from those different 9 planes. And as I say, that pineal gland is able us to sink in or to remember what the vibrational qualities were of these different planes. And so a master come in and then touching whatever symbolic, physically or even symbolic, is to sink you back in so you know the difference. You understand? So this is one of the characteristics of why these golden children obviously are very important, because they need to be taught that. Understood? And certainly in order to, as one of their roles as Ray Ha'achet, which is a program to reunite the energy of our ancestors to ensure that they are only feeding in our forces, which vibrate at 7, 8, and 9 ether. They'll always be of our own ancestry, and we don't find aspects of the energy part of ourself, our soul, you understand, in places where they're being used as etheric batteries for lower forces. Okay, so the master of time there is the pineal gland. That's the correct answer. And then question 10, Yaanuwn tap, what does it represent? And the answer here is the invisible. Yeah, so we talked about in part 1 the point of singularity of how a universe obviously is being formed. And we read, I think, from All Expanding, it was the omniverse was the fact that we are, or you are, in the sense, so in the context of this, we are, yeah, all space without need for movement of growth. And so omniverse is it's all, isn't it? But without need for movement and growth. So when you talk about omni, we are talking about stillness. You understand? Motion comes in when we, out of omniverse, you get multiverses. Yeah, so that is, we are all things with movement and growth. And so, important distinction. Remember, when we say omniverse, without need of movement or growth, I mean, it doesn't have to happen. Yeah, so it's the mind of all, which we can't say why it all does what it does or doesn't, in a sense, but obviously it willed, by its own decision, willed multiverses to be born, do you understand, or to come into existence in that regard. And so therefore, as a result of that, we have all things with movement and growth. And so the rules of existence then kick in, isn't it? And we know that journey, being, becoming, became. And then when we get to triverses, we are reaction with each other to become places. Understood? So places get created by way of triversal birth or coming into existence. Understood? And things need to fill those spaces. Yeah, so that's the better things in that regard, to fill those spaces with space and time. And then we get dual verses, us being separated into opposites or opposing places. And then when we get dual verses which give birth to a universe, that's a point in space, time, and material or matter. Understood? So, and at that point, or at that point, what exists at that point is Yaanuwn and Yaanuwn-Tat. Do you understand? So Yaanuwn representing the visible, Yaanuwn-Tat representing the invisible. Do you understand? And that sparks of causes, for the purpose of this understanding, causes a spark of time. So within that universe, as I said, we've got now this point of origin, and we've got clearly growth and declination. This universe was created 24 billion years ago, and so therefore, as we read, I think last week as well, so 2 weeks ago, 9 sextillion, and will last for 9 sextillion years, as we understand years to be. So that's a long time. I think 24 billion, if my maths is correct, would be effectively 8, so minus 24 billion. So how much years do you think about how much you'd have left? It would be 8 sextillion, 999 quintillion, 999 quadrillion, 999 trillion, 976 billion. So that's how much years left that this universe has before, so it implodes on itself. So a long time. And that's just one. That's just one. And I think the smallest, of the universe is on this side of the black hole. Okay, so that was a quick recap there. So we're going to get into what we need to discuss for today. Are there any questions? Yeah, and feel free to check my maths on that. Feel free to check my maths on the how old the universe is.
There are no questions from me.
No questions at the moment, no? Okay. Excellent. Okay. Right. So, all right, let's get into it then. So, so this is from, Lost Records of Time. So, we're being given, for our understanding, clearly, we are primarily being focused on time's perspective, or our way of measuring, or by way of time, is based on the movement primarily of the Earth, its own movement in itself, and its clearly movement around the sun. Yeah, so we're going to focus on that today to get proper understanding of that phenomena. Understood? So obviously we've got the we've got lunar days, solar days here, as you can see, and basically the planet itself is being pulled by various different other planetary forces, do you understand, or bodies. So the moon obviously is tugging upon the planet itself, you understand, because it was once a part of the planet, and it's the magnetic attraction is coming from the science of water, because the waters of the moon at one time, which had water, are pulling on the waters of the planet Earth. So the science about water, or the secret of water, is that water is always seeking to find other water. Understood? So the sort of lunar cycle, so to speak, or the moon itself, has an impact on certainly the tides of the planet Earth, as well as having an effect on the mind of human beings at a certain point, which we will touch on a bit later. Hence why you get the word lunatic, and why people tend to be a bit off key, the day before full moon, or even after. You understand? So in movies, isn't it, that's been emphasized with werewolves and that kind of talk or whatever, but obviously sitting behind it is some element of truth, insofar as it can affect the emotional well-being of individuals when we do get changes in these planetary bodies. So, see here, Earth is 93 million miles away from the Sun at certain points in its orbit, which we're going to touch upon today. And it takes, as you can see, 365.26 days for it to revolve in one orbit, as I say, around the Sun, and come back to that same point in time. Now, the important thing for us to understand is that the planet Earth is controlled, or planet Ba'h Yaanuwn, or Earth, or Ptah, is controlled by the same forces, and we have the same characteristics or makeup. You understand? So, yeah, it has a central sun, despite more popular opinions that the planet is solid. It's not solid. It's in fact hollow. Many different caverns inside. And there's a central sun, 600 miles in diameter. You understand? Planet weighs 6 septillion tons. That's 6 and 21 zeros. It is not heavy enough. That's not sufficient weight for it to be a solid mass or ball, as they kind of record it within. And we'll see. Their views around that are changing. Journey to the center of the Earth, all that kind of stuff. It's becoming a lot more realistic, but I still want to make it look like we're not talking about a ball of Earth which is hollow, inside around this central sun. So we also have a central sun referred to as a solar plexus. The planet Earth obviously has these magnetic poles at north and south, as they're classified today, and we have a pole or energy that we're receiving as well from our relationship to the sun. And the fact of the matter is that, as I say, the electricity that's being generated in the human body is basically because of the friction of magnetism and ethers interacting with our atoms and cells, which generates electricity. Do you understand? So you've got a relationship here where you've got the sun 93 million miles away. We then have got our own sun, and then we've got this sun in the center of the planet. Do you understand? So those are in alignment with each other, because remember, you've got gravity, which is effectively pushing us down, because we're on a spinning ball. You understand? So you've got gravity pushing us down, but then the question is, well, if you're on a spinning ball, like if you was on a roundabout, for example, and it span around, you've got to hold on, or you're going to fly off. You see what I'm saying? So you've got this energy which is pushing down, but then you've got equal amount of energy which is pushing up, referred to as levity. Understood? And obviously our sync or central sun is holding us, in the position we're in between these 2 points, sun 93 million miles away, and then the sun in the center. So we are effectively the same, because we're made up of the same material, And as you know, there's correlation between the amount of liquid that we have in our body versus the amount of solid that we are, which is the same as the planet Earth. So it's important to understand that. So again, we showed this, I think, last time, just a quick recap. So we're understanding that we've got 3 of these characteristics: diameter, radius, and circumference in this regard. So the sun, the moon, and the planet obviously have these same ratings, or can be measured in this way. So this is a shared characteristic that we have, and clearly, if you take the diameter and then you times it by pi, 3.14, I think it's the early figures, it's going to give you then the circumference, isn't it? Do you understand, of the planet Earth? So again, another triad set of principles. Seems obvious, but it's something that we have to lock in and recognize. So particularly verse 8 here says, so in fact these bodies each relate to each other in this way, and note that the sun is another star, and this moon is the moon is a planet, if you didn't know. So it's not just an inanimate body, it's a planet in itself. And then over time they shift as in 1 degree every 72 years. So thus over a long period of time they change positions, and this can cause confusion to time keepers who don't really have the secrets. Says, now let me, Parmanzan Nathatam and the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, reveal to you the long lost secrets of these time shifts. So we're going to focus on planetary movement, and then maybe later in this class or in part 3 specifically speak about the confusion of the lost records in the sand in that regard. Now here you see a certain type of pyramids. These are the pyramids that you see from Nubia, and so what they're classifying as pre-dynastic Egypt. Now you've got a class that deals with dynastic and pre-dynastic Egypt, but that's to some degree their classifications of how they want to log us in time. But these are pre-dynastic pyramids, so the early ones which gave birth. So Khufu did not build the pyramids, they renovated them. Do you understand? So they made them, obviously the 3 ones, the 3 at Giza, obviously clearly are tremendous in size, but they're based on pre-dynastic design. In fact, they went down south, so to speak, to get the design, then to redesign those pyramids. You understand, from the little people or the pre-dynastic ancient Egyptians in that regard. So this shifting of the axis of the planet, and so on the rotation of the axis of the planet as well, is why the stars do not appear in the same location and configuration over many years. So this is what's caused some of the confusion that has been spoken about, and we touched upon some other elements as well in part 1. So what we're going to do, we're just going to listen to an excerpt from Partakia, Beauty of Religion, Part 2. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to walk through so we're very clear on the understanding of what that looks like. Remember, we expressed before that we have our way of looking at things, that Nupu, that 9 way of looking at it, and they have their way of doing things, which is Zupu. Do you understand? And so in the Millennium Scroll, I think Part 1, remember, it talks about various different secret societies, Druids, you understand, the Elks, Illuminati, different ones or whatever. These are the eclipse of the Sun of Righteousness. Do you understand? So you're seeing that, the Master Teacher, and you're looking at our symbolism is giving us a certain type of information, isn't it, coming from our ancestors, the Parnabaru, giving us that, trying to give us that information to get us back on that 9 mind frequency again. And you've got forces out there which are of a similar look blocking that, and saying it's a tactic, as I say, that you have to understand. Remember, everything's based upon it's going to be based upon us because we were originally the ones here, isn't it? So there's going to be some copy of what we're doing, but it's going to oppose. Yeah, so much like you see symbolically in numerology, 9 is, you understand, 6 is the inverse of 9, understood? So it's going to oppose in that regard, and so we're going to see some evidence of that. So let's just pick up this particular Partarak.
Atumre.
Rahbat Asar.
This is part 2. We'll start with this just for a few
We'll be
minutes.
reading part 2 of the beauty of religion. Verse 124. You saw the black pyramid, you saw the labyrinth, you saw the scarab altar, underneath was flowing water. 125. You walked through a sprinkler to get wet for the charge. You greeted a tall statue in the northeast entrance before walking the labyrinth. Who was he? No one asked. 126. You constructed him. I came, looked up, and said, it's not right. Rebuild it until it's right. Without question, you did as I asked of you. 127. Still no one asked. Just who is he? 128. I must tell you before I pass on or return to Sahat, Orion star system. 129. He was called Nu Ma'at Re, also Ni Ma'at Ra. Another name of his was Amun-Em-Hat III, or Amun-Em-Hat III, born 1818 BC, and departed for Sabahat 1776 BC. 130. This date is very important to you. 131. You will find it on the back of the US dollar bill at the base of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. 132. You see it hidden as Roman digits MDCCLXXV1. Note, they did not put AD at the end, the Latin or Roman Anno Domini, which is written AD, to mark the first year to change from BC, before Christ, to AD, after Christ. They did not put 1776 AD because it's 1776 BC. The death date, as they call departure of Amun-Em-Hat III, and it marks the end of their 6,000-year rule. You note it's our great seal. 133. Note on their version, you see it's point out the 5-letter Mason for Masonic order, free to build.
So birth of religion. So we're focusing on, there's a lot of interesting stuff.
You note it forms a 6.
But for time, we're going to crack on with what we're talking about here. So what was being expressed was, the master teacher was expressing the fact that in guiding us to construct this pyramid, the Black Pyramid here, and you see the labyrinth there, introducing the Magaraj or Power Magaraj ceremony, which translates as the journey within. Yes, there was an individual in the corner, and as it was being constructed, was having to make certain corrections, but no one asked the question, well, who is this guy in the corner that you're building and that we're giving reference to? You see what I'm saying? So basically, this is a bit of a clearer image of this individual. You can see someone here performing the Magaraj in the attire of a member of the ancient Egyptian order. Now, the interesting thing is that when we start breaking it down, so who is in the corner, as I say, we get Amun-Em-Hat III, yeah, Parthalan, and various different names above. And his birth date and transition date obviously was 1776 BC. So when we look at the bottom of the dollar bill, we see those Roman numeral letters, isn't it? As it be expressed there at the base of the pyramid. And so when we start to break down these letters, M is 1,000, yes, isn't it? Yeah. D is 500. C is 100. Another C, 100 there. L is 50. X is 10. X again is 10. V, as you're more familiar with, is 5. And then the I represents 1, isn't it? Yeah. So when you calculate all of that then together, we get 1776. Yeah. So it's tying in to his transition date. Hence why they didn't put the AD, because it's talking about BC. So these symbols, haven't they? They've been associated with Illuminati, different things of that nature. But the true meaning behind the fake expression of it, yes, and where they're, I suppose, drawing a certain level of inspiration and power from is from our stuff, in the sense when you really get behind the veil to get to the facts of what's actually going on. Yeah. And so, yeah, Amun-Em-Het the third, yeah, or Amun-Em-Hat, yeah, or Hatat, in that regard. Yep. So here, as I say, I'm more familiar with some of the known identity or what it's been associated with. Now, cutting through the noise, what we see here is that the pyramid itself has 13 layers of bricks. And actuality, if you counted the bricks, there's 72 bricks. Yeah, those 72 bricks ties back into the 72 years that it takes of the axis to move 1 degree. Yes, overstood around in this phenomena known as precession, or precession change. So the axis of the planet obviously is there like a spinning top. Because it's on a 23.5 degree axis, and there's many types of precession, you understand? So but the big one that we're interested in is the one, because we've got this equinox that takes 24,000 years. Obviously the planet now is on a 23.5 degree axis, so it doesn't take 24,000 years, it takes longer, it takes 26,000 years. So we're interested in precession of the equinox, and that's what it's making reference to. So in order for it to go, when it's going around, yes, it takes 1 degree. Yeah, 1 degree, it moves, it takes 72 years to move 1 degree in that 26,000 year cycle. Understood? And so what happens is that axis in precession of the equinoxes, it basically takes 2,160 years to move from, or be aligned or move through one constellation, yes, moving into another. Understand? And when it moves, that's being referred to, isn't it, as a change of age. Understood? So they said we moved from Piscean era, yeah, into the age of Aquarius, got other names, age of Aquarius, Tar, age of Sirius, age of Phoenix. Understood? Yeah, but that's what it's making reference to, because obviously what we're logging, isn't it, is the fact that we are receiving different types of cosmic energy from the composition of suns and different bodies, obviously, which are hitting the planet, obviously at a more intensive rate when that particular axis is aligned or passing through that constellation. You understand? And so that's what we're tracking. Obviously today, as you will see, we from a technological point of view, we place more emphasis and focus in the West, at least, on the sun, which is 93 million miles away. Understand? We've got solar panels now. We've got different types of technology which is based upon that sun. But in astrology, or the true science of astrology, and is really astronomy, is dealing with the energy that we're receiving from that particular constellation, because it has an effect upon life forms here on the planet. You understand? And so, obviously, from that perspective, having been taught by the Parnatharu, we were interested in all of the energy that was focused on the planet in particular period of time coming from that constellation. So the symbolism of that is what you're seeing on the back of that dollar bill. Understood? Because Amun-Enhat, the Magaraj ceremony, remember, was designed as a form of spiritual aerobics. Let me just close these windows 1 second. Right, back. So the Magaraj ceremony, remember, because was designed to make human beings more, or vibrate on more positive frequency, because human beings have a very negative attitude. I can't do this, I can't do that, so on and so forth. But it was changing an individual at a cellular, at an atomic level, so to make the composite atoms vibrate on a more positive frequency. Remember, pyramids, depend on their shape, allowed us to study, because obviously you're taking in solar energy, and the pyramid shape, understood, converts that those solar particles, solar energy, into standard column waves, understood? And so it allowed us to study tachyonic energy at a subatomic level, plus, minus, or minus, understood? And so the ritual was designed to change that you at a cellular atomic level to a more positive, a can-do type of attitude, you understand? So using solar energy and using a way to impact and affect the human body in this very clever and specific way that Amun-Enhat the third was able to do at that particular time as the pharaoh. You understand? I think when we get into this a bit later, there is a distinction between pharaoh and ruler. You understand? So they're two different things. The word ruler, remember, is Naisut for male and Naisutat for female. A ruler doesn't necessarily mean that they are a pharaoh, because the word pharaoh, which has been not properly translated in Greek, you understand, because they get the word so not properly translated in Greek. When you take it back to Sabaic or Misbatia, we get para, you understand, aha, rie, you understand? So, which is the temple of the sun and moon, understood? Which is what the pharaoh was as the point person in the relationship between us and our ancestors as Parnatharu, do you understand? And so that guidance, or that direction at least, spiritually, understand, or etherically, how they're going to take us as the tribe to make sure that we're in proper alignment with the universal order that they want us to, and direction they want us to take for optimum growth, isn't it? Because we're seeking to become, we're seeking perfection, and to perfect ourselves as supreme beings, obviously to become 720. Again, it's a mastery of the physical, and then mastery of the esoteric, understood, in that regard. So this is the symbolism being shown here on the back of the dollar bill, which was what was being expressed. And so one has to understand precession change in that regard. So here, just a quick sort of animation, really, just to show you, and we'll cover this in a bit more detail. But obviously, you've got the planet here. We've got the sun, which is appearing to move because the solar system obviously is rotating in a circle. Its axis to the planet, obviously, which is at 23.5 degrees. And then we've got the celestial globe, which is a map which sort of mirrors the planet Earth, but it houses a way to look at the relativity of the constellations to somebody looking on the planet upwards. And so you see that axis there in Precession Change 2012 is they're making a circle, isn't it? It's 26,000 year circle, and at certain points, as I say, so every 2,160 or some odd years, it's moving, or the alignment of that axis is aligned itself with different constellations or houses, understood, which they've classified as 12. But as you see here, obviously 13 layers, and we talked earlier, isn't it? Obviously, don't forget about the center. Yeah, so the center, or point center. So all of this is really talking about astronomy / astrology. It's talking about the stars. Remember, the Master Teacher expressed that most of your Bible stories, Quranic stories, are based on the birth and deaths of solar systems. In a sense, it's all about this, the changes that are taking place in the so-called heavens, and this is no different. Yeah, so the symbolism of what they're using it for, and trying to give the illusion that they have power in this regard. What is sitting behind it, the real power which they've tried to veil or eclipse, is going back to ancient Egypt and ancient Tamaray. You understand? So this is really our stuff, which, as you see, is being misused, or they're trying to draw the power from our stuff to give validity to their, you understand, the way in which they wish to express, to inform their kind of new world order. But it all ties back into this precession change movement, which, as the Partarak, expressed, symbolizes the end of their time. Do you understand? The coming of the end of their time period, which we're in right now, their time to rule. Okay, any questions? Okay, so here, so if you want to, we're going to go through this class because we're doing revisited, so we're just approaching it from a different angle. So we're going to go through this class as the planet turns, so we get an understanding of all of the different types of movements and the science around it. So when we start to get into the symbolism, you should be clear in that regard. So it's telling you in verse 1, Master says, Sabaeans, the day will come, and all will look at the sun. Men, women, and children will cry. Odd things will appear in the sky. So a lot of books that we're reading, and certainly Lost Records of Time, Precession Change, different things of that nature. So I see a lot of people quoting Revelations and different books of that nature. A lot of the events in those books have already happened. Given obviously the Master Teacher is currently in prison, remember, he slowed down the efficiency of how he was teaching before he was incarcerated. And, there's a certain urgency that now we understand, looking at the planet, and obviously this week, a very important environmental report was released, which showed the kind of, the sort of danger that the planet is under right now if certain changes are not made to the habits or the way we're living right now, you understand, where we're consuming or contributing towards global warming. So we're seeing that right now, you understand? But a lot of those books that were released, Lost Records of Time, certainly over 10 years old. Precession Change 2012 is much older than that. And these even books were written, if you really go into it, was sort of for the early sort of 2000s to prepare us for the time that we would be coming in. Generally speaking, the masters, teachers always try to keep us 10 years ahead, if not longer, of certain things that are taking place, right now. Just the problem sometimes is that we're not reading enough, you understand? We're not paying attention enough to what's going on. And sometimes we might catch ourselves looking at things after and not preparing for it, as and when things are happening. So this is why his role is so important. I mean, you think about the work that went into building that Magaraj ceremony. I mean, that's just one book. Let's be clear. That's just one book, one ritual out of 1,000 books. Yeah, but the intensity, look, need to get this done, get this built. The time, because the time of the events which are due to happen in nature, to optimize what was supposed to take place, we needed those buildings in place. Now, to the onlooker, it looks like, oh, well, this cult is building pyramids in the middle of Georgia, whatever the case may be. But you can see it has significance. We're dealing with nature here. Once you miss that opportunity or window or that particular event, when's the next one coming? The next one potentially is not for another 12 to 13,000 years. The next one's not for another 26,000 years. The next one's not for another 50,000 years. Do you understand? So the level of urgency, sometimes you heard speaking for us, we can be very complacent. As we were talking about last class, the certain place is going to flood, this thing or whatever. Unless it lands on your doorstep, let's be honest, you hear it, but you don't hear it. You understand? You hear it, but you don't hear it. All the predictions about coronavirus were in books. You know what I mean? After the event, people, hey, it's got coronavirus in here. Hey, it's got the extraterrestrial is going to move this thing to a next level and release this virus into the planet, etc. Now, before it, we were warned years before it was taking place, and still, we haven't done what's necessary. Free the master, get out of the West, position ourselves in the correct place around the planet where we can build and gather together. These are challenges that we face. They know this. This is why they're making it tough and hard for us to do what we need to do. Do you understand? But what I'm saying is, you see the effort and collective energy that went into building Tamaray, which would have been a safe haven for times such as this. And if we think about when, go back to 2004, when was the last time we owned it? How much would we have developed it much further to them? Remember, we were even blocked from putting houses and different things on there through they're messing about with zoning laws. So it was a land grab taken away from us for a certain group of people to gather. And so these are the challenges now where things get delayed. It causes us more difficulty. Obviously, got to try and go a different route or a different way. But as you know, in some instances, as far as nature is concerned, once the damage is done, that is it in the sand. And so everybody has to be concerned about what is taking place in terms of the state of the planet right now, and in terms of caring for it. Most of us, let's be honest, because of financial, economic conditions that we find ourselves in, we're not always focused on outwardly on nature. People that I've got to make my money, do you understand? Pay my bills, boom, 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 boom. You understand? So it's hard to then be outwardly focused on what is taking place environmentally. But it's key now. We're at that then time where you ain't got a choice, really. You understand? It has to be focused, and we have to focus in relation to what our role is in terms of what is taking place in terms of the shift of the planet right now. Now, so things are starting to appear in the sky, all recorded by the ancient ones. And it says the real astronomers, ancient scientists who kept the secrets sacred, yet record the movements of earth, land, water, sea, and heaven's sky. The great clock of time, all or most moving counterclockwise. You are now on Ptah Earth, so that is what Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn will deal with here. So this is important. Yeah? As soon as we step out of the Earth's atmosphere, remember, a meter is not a meter again. Understand? Time as we know it is not the same. So everything that we're looking at is from Earth's perspective. Right here. So obviously you see here from this diagram, if you're not familiar with how seasons work, then we just need to understand, at least for the purposes of this, you've got one type of rotation here, which is the Earth moving around the sun, and then another rotation here is that basically the Earth here is spinning on its own axis. So it's turning on its own axis, but it's also moving around or orbiting around this central sun at the same time. So both movements obviously are important as it relates to what we're talking about here today. You understand? So and then obviously you've got the moon here, which is orbiting around the planet at the same time. So these revolving bodies is not only how we classify time, but we're analysing also the impact of what that has to us as life forms here on the planet Earth. Now, as we expressed earlier, circumference, radius, and diameter. Obviously, in times in that diameter by pi will give us the circumference of the planet. And we touched upon last week, isn't it, that when we see here 1 mile for every year. So that's because the planet, broadly speaking, is 24,890 miles in circumference. It does expand and contract. And that also ties into the 24,000 year equinox, understood, which is the solar system, as I say, making an orbit around the center of the galaxy. And also we can see now, obviously 24 billion years ago, this universe was created. So this number 24, obviously rounded, 24 hours in a day, comes up, and this is by obviously natural design. Do you understand? By way of Partakia, the mathematics is supreme in this regard. Understood? So clearly, this also affects us, isn't it? We have a circadian rhythm, which is also based in 3 sets of 8 hours. So again, the 24 number in terms of symbolism is particularly important. Now, so planet, as we did touch upon in the past 2 weeks ago, for you to understand time, remember that it was split into these various different time zones, isn't it? So that 24-hour day, they split the time zones 24 hours in wrong time, you understand? But the planet is moving at 1,024 miles per hour. And so, for example, let's say if it's 1 o'clock in England and you were on a plane that was flying at 1,024 miles per hour, because if you go to the right of their map, let's say, okay, it's 1 hour ahead, isn't it? Yeah, 1 hour ahead. In fact, let me just make sure that's 100% correct. Just you know what I'm talking about. Spare me 1 sec. To make you sick. But yeah, so 1 hour ahead. Yep. So if we go to the right, it's 1 hour ahead, isn't it? Then 2 hours ahead. But these are broken up into segments, isn't it, of 1,024 to make up your 24,800 and so on and so forth. Yes. So basically, if I start here on a plane in GMT, which we're here in London, and I fly at 1,024 miles per hour, do you understand? As I'm traveling around the planet, it's going to be the same time, you understand? Because I'm moving in sync. The way they've calculated or do their calculation of time here, understood, it's not going to be 1 hour ahead. It's always going to be 12 o'clock. And so if I'm moving at the same speed as the planet is turning, do you understand? Because the way they've done their thing. If I move faster than that speed and I'm outside of the Earth's, I'm in space and I'm flying around, say faster than 1,024, I'm going to come back younger than when I left. And so there may be only slightly, but I'm going to come back younger than when I'm left, because that circling is obviously affecting all the different time systems here on the planet Earth. So this is where I suppose we have to now understand how it relates, these movements of these planetary bodies, how it relates to time here. So if you're moving at 1,024 by this time zone, it would always be 12 o'clock. You're flying around the planet here like that. You understand? At that particular speed. I'm talking outside of the planet Earth, going around by this time system. So you see why it's problematic in that regard. So what's he talking about here when we look at these verses? So with 1,024 is what it's spinning on its axis on. And then here in verse 11, it's showing us here that basically the speed that the planet is making its orbit around the sun is 666,600 miles per hour. Understood? Yeah, this is how sort of fast the planet is moving in that regard. Understood? And so I think it's approximately, we talk about the distance from the sun, isn't it? We say about 93 million miles per hour in that regard. But the sort of length of time from, or this orbit here, yeah, is over 500 million miles. I mean, it's just shy of probably closer to 600 million miles. Do you understand? In terms of the actual distance of the orbit that we're looking at here. So tremendous, even though it's considered maybe quite small in universal terms, we are talking about a tremendous amount of distance here that's being covered, you know, for our own mind and understanding here. Yeah. So yeah, so we're moving at a rapid rate. 1,024 miles, yeah, spinning on its axis. Yeah, so in here, this kind of movement of it spinning on its own axis and then moving at 66,600 miles per hour. That's the distance it's moving around the sun. And importantly, remember, all these motions and movements are moving in an anti-clockwise direction. Understood? Anti-clockwise. So clockwise gives the impression, as I say, of a kind of left to right kind of movement. Understood? Yeah, around the circle in that direction. But nature is moving in the opposite direction. Yeah, so anti-clockwise. So you can see when he sets up his systems, oftentimes he's going against the natural order of things. Understood? Yeah. So standard 1 year needed. To make a full circle around. And it's saying in 13, but and in operation of the seasons themselves, it's possible to see wondrous and impartial mechanism at work, distributing spring, summer, autumn, and winter fairly around the globe across the northern and southern hemispheres, year in, year out, with absolute regularity. So what that's basically expressing here is that we can see with the 23.5 degree axis, yes, at certain points the planet obviously is leaning, isn't it? Yeah. So if you're in the southern hemisphere for 6 months of the year, you're closer to the sun because the planet is leaning in, so you're receiving more solar energy, so therefore that becomes your summer. But on the top half, you're leaning away, so therefore that's your winter season. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so in between that, obviously we have summer and spring. Yeah, so this is what expression. So, but remember, at one time before that, when the planet was more perpendicular, obviously you had a more even distribution. We didn't have 4 seasons; we had 2. You understand? So obviously above and below the equator. So you can see quite easily how seasons work is how much obviously solar energy that you are receiving. But even in its current system, as I say, you know, it works out perfectly. So these moods of vibrational energy that are being received by the sun, to demystify it, you can see, okay, well, it's based upon proximity, isn't it? Yeah. So closer to the sun at certain points, further away at other points. And as we see here, this orbit is around, as I say, just shy of 584 million miles there in orbit. So tremendous in size in that regard. So, and as you can see here, again from precession change, so we've got Earth, male, Sun, Moon, female, obviously, and then we've got the Sun, which is neutral gender. There's a Ba'h Yaanuwn, both male and female, in its 4 iterations. Yeah, so Atum, as the position of the sun as it appears to rise in the morning. as male. The sun as it appears at noon, female. The sun as it appears to set, male. And then Anun, which is the position of the sun as it appears in darkness. So you can, when we're in shadow hour, so not really nighttime, it's shadow because we're facing away from the sun. So it's in shadow hour. The sun is perceived but not seen. Yes, so that is the Anun point. When you add the sun in these positions, then it becomes Anun Reye or Atum Reye or Atun Reye or Amun Reye. So when the sun is in that position, you add in the Reye part. Now, obviously, when you overlay these seasons, isn't it, you will see that, let's say it's this, could be summer or winter, but let's say this is winter, and then this is summer, and then this is spring, and this is autumn. So we've explained this before, but just to go over it again. So obviously they will show the male, which is XY, and show XY here for the male, for representing these seasons here. Yeah. So it's just. It's a bit easier for it to show you here. So let's say, so for example, if we put XY here as the male principles, then these would be XX showing here. Do you understand? These positions of the sun if you're overlaying it. And so basically what that's showing you is XY, which is, if you look at it sort of geometrically, or you calculate the sort of angles, yeah, you've got 360 on that x-axis, and then with the y, you've got 390-degree angles, which is obviously 270. Do you understand? So we add them both together equals 630. The woman, obviously, both the x and the two x's, obviously you look at the core, there's 490-degree angles on both x's, and so that equals 720. So the woman is perfectly balanced, isn't it, as the double X? And so when you look at autumn is not quite spring, is it? It's not quite, so it's not quite summer and it's not quite winter. It's in between. It's balanced. Spring is not quite winter. It's not quite summer. It's balanced. You understand? So 360, 360. But when you look at summer is an extreme of spring. So the male is in balance, isn't it, at 630? Yeah, because it's 360 for the X and then 270. Yeah, 270 for the Y, so it's imbalanced. You understand? Again, winter is an extreme of autumn, so it's not balanced. You see? So this is why you get the symbolism showing in there, so in the male and female positions of the sun. But obviously, because it incorporates both, it's neutral. You understand? And that's only, remember again, us looking up from the earth, isn't it, upwards, to get these four positions, because the sun is not moving in this rotational direction in that regard. Okay, so it's letting us know here, verse 14, axis of rotation is tilted in relation to the planet, an orbit of 23 degrees to the vertical. The present tilt causes seasons and points to the North Pole and the entire northern hemisphere away from the sun. So we've just covered that. Yep. So let's go down to 17. So the tilt is known as the obliquity, and the plane of its orbit extends outwards to form a greater circle in the celestial sphere, known as the ecliptic. Astronomers speak of 18. Astronomers speak of the celestial equator, which is an extension of the planet Earth's equator into the celestial sphere. So when we're looking at these things, we have to sort of really take it to the internet or whatever books you're going to use to do that. So we now understand that this axis at 23 or 23 and a half degrees, it does change. We'll get into that. Yeah, moving from 22 degrees to 24 degrees over a period of time. But we can see that tilt is known as the obliquity. Yeah, that's a fancy astronomical term for it, obliquity. And then we see that the equator of the planet is extended outwards, and this is being referred to as the ecliptic. Yes, this is what we were reading about there. And then the celestial equator, so when we looked at that diagram, remember we were showing you the axis, there's a celestial globe that enables or is used to map the constellation positions at different points throughout the year on the planets. You have this celestial globe, and its equator is designed to match the planet's equator, which, because it's tilted on its axis, the equator then tilts. Understood? Yeah, the true equator then tilts, as opposed to the elliptic, which is basically the elliptic, which is basically the middle of the planet in terms of the equator. As you sometimes see it drawn, but it's not quite accurate because it's tilted the same way the planet is tilted. Yeah. So in that regard, here it's saying that is to log, I suppose, the position of the orbital movement around the sun, because it's obviously moving in this kind of angular direction, which is probably better seen on this diagram. Do you understand? Where you're seeing it obviously on this kind of more tilted angle, just so you can see that. Yeah, so if we're then putting that into there, you're going to move it, isn't it, through halfway through where the planet is showing, although even here it's showing the elliptic tilted in this diagram. You understand? So again, for understanding purposes, somebody's drawing these diagrams, so they're not necessarily always accurate. Somebody's interpretation of what they're understanding of what is taking place. You have to factor that in sometimes when you're looking at these things also. So understand Earth's tilt now. You understand our tilt on its axis. That space between here and here is known as the obliquity. You understand? And this here is known as the ecliptic, and it's dealing with the orbit of the planet. Now, so any questions? Any questions? Let's just see. Okay, nothing changing there. Okay, so no questions at the moment then. Okay, so the celestial crater is inclined at 23 degrees. Okay, we just demonstrated that, or show that for understanding. Planet Earth's axis is inclined at 22 degrees to the vertical. You understand? This angular term is known as the obliquity of the elliptic. It's not fixed and immutable for all time. On the contrary, it is subject to constant though very slow oscillations. These occur across a range of slightly less than at 24 degrees. 21. A full cycle from 24 degrees to 22 degrees and then back again to 24 degrees takes approximately 50,000 years, or an epoch, to complete. So what we're seeing here is this nodding taking place of the planet, obviously, which is sizable, or rocking back and forth, isn't it, between 22 degrees, yes, and 24 degrees over a 50,000 year cycle. Understand? Obviously, we talked about precession change in terms of that movement, and then you've got this ongoing rotation of the planet. You understand what I'm saying? So the planet is nodding. Now, I think it's 2,160 years astronomically and scientifically, it tells you in precession change, that you would have to continuously observe the axis of the planet for that long in order to notice that there was a wobble in the planet's axis. Yeah, so that tells you how long we've been around for. Understand? So you'd have to observe it continuously for that length of time to even notice that there's this shift in the axis. So that it kind of throws a 6,000 year chronology into, into a problem, because, you've got to count in evolution, do you understand, to get to where we are, where we're concerning ourselves about looking at the axis of the planet. Well, what if human beings were making fire, you understand, doing all these different things, why all of a sudden will we be even looking and noticing about this axis of the planet? Obviously somebody's come along and informed us or taught us about this, and to see it or be able to describe and build structures that are monitoring this type of activity, you have to be looking at it from a certain perspective, do you understand, to really understand that. I'm saying it is noticeable from Earth, but it's more difficult, certainly than looking at it from the outside or even looking at it from above, to notice this kind of pattern or movement. And that's because it's moving so slow that that's why it would require that length of time. And so this oscillation or nodding, as we can see there, 22 degrees to 24 degrees, the kind of back and forth would happen in one 50,000 year cycle. So this fragile planet nods and spins while soaring throughout its orbit. Its orbit takes 365, we're familiar with that, and the spin takes 24 hours a day. And the nod cycle takes 50,000 years in the sand. So now you understand that in some detail. For a while, celestial orbit is going on as the planet Earth skips and skims and dives through eternity, and you can feel the tug of contradictory urges to pull into the sun, and on the other hand, or to make it move to outer space on the other. So basically, one of the things that's causing this tugging, or you get different types of precessional movement, is because, as I say, you're getting the sun, Venus and Mercury and Venus pulling the axis or the planet on one side, trying to draw it into the sun, and then on the other side it's got energy from the other planets, and also the fact it's rotating in a circle is trying to push it away, going in the other direction, away from the sun. So you get this almost perfect balance of position, but that tugging obviously is having an impact there on the planet Earth. Now, interesting enough, in 25, so it's not so true north, it's to the magnetic right in terms of its pole. But here it's saying, I am on the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, tell you Sabians all of this, because it's better to know it and not need it than to need it and not know about it. You understand? So I'm telling you this, you know what I mean? Because if you need it, then you have it. If you don't know it, you know what I mean, then you might need it. It's better that you know than don't know. So very important, as I say, you know, you can see highly scientific, you know, you got to, whether you know what I mean, you haven't studied physics or whatever, or science in your time you use at school, this is now the inspiration for you to get back into these things for understanding. You know, as it says in My Brother the Extraterrestrial, Wu-Sabat is looking for intelligent people, you understand? So it's not about dumbing things down necessarily. Obviously things need to be understandable, but we've got to put the work in to understand what's being conveyed. You understand? Everything can be lowered down to this basic level. No, we've got to study and also, you know, raise up, and that means in certain instances you can say it's the white man's information, whatever, but the fact of the matter is these terms are there. If they're being expressed, you've got to get into it and understand what they mean to get understanding of what's being conveyed. You understand? So and that takes work there for those who want to put that work in to really understand. So you know, true spirituality is not just, you know, doing rituals and connecting. It's also about understanding, because they chose to communicate this information to us in books called the beautiful words. So therefore, if we're really respecting it, then we're going to be mastering all aspects in the way in which the information is delivered, either that's knowledge, you know, experience, however those tests or however that's being communicated to us. So here, nice little diagram just to help us here. So obliquity, now we should understand that, yeah, in terms of that, the perpendicular, it's the space between the perpendicular and the shift of the axis, and so again from perpendicular 24 degrees, even then it's at 23.5 degrees, some say 23 degrees, but it's going to shift, isn't it, between 22 and 24, over a 50,000 year cycle. You understand about precessional movement of the rotation of the axis of the planet. And then here, in terms of the orbit, we have something called eccentricity. Do you understand? So depending on the level of eccentricity will determine basically whether we've got a circle or a more ecliptical type shape or orbit. Yeah. And here, this gives a nice sort of impression of you've got different types of precessional movement. Do you see what I'm saying? Because you've got this different wobbling effect, as well as the sort of different types of movement of the axis. But the big one is called precession of the equinoxes, because an equinox is 24,000 years. So that larger one, that's why it's called that precession of the equinox. So the different types of precessional movement in that regard. So here, can you see, if I can show this one first. So you can see with the eccentricity, you see the number there as 0, you've got the perfect circle, haven't you? Yeah. And then, so it's small, the higher number increases, the greater the kind of elliptical look, you understand, in that regard. So here, I think the elliptical change is around about 6% of the orbit of the planet Earth. So it's still quite circular, but it is elliptical. Why is that important? Well, at certain points, remember, when you're looking at a circle, a perfect circle where it's 0, at each point, isn't it? Yeah, whatever point you take it on the circle, it is equidistant to the center. So it's going to be of equal distance, isn't it, to the center. But when we've got an elliptical shape, obviously you've got extremes and you've got apogees and perigees. You've got points where the planet in that type of orbit is going to be closer to the sun, and then you're going to have points where it's going to be furthest away. And we've seen from the seasons that is going to obviously have an impact on effect on how much energy and the type of energy that the planet is receiving, or different parts of the planet are receiving at any one time throughout the year. And so it's important to understand these characteristics. Understood? Yeah. So let's walk us through. Now this is an interesting verse here at 26. It says, Partakia, the sun's gravitational domain in the inner circles of which the planet Earth is held captive is known to extend 19 trillion miles into space, almost halfway to the nearest star. So this this sun is kicking out a gravitational pull 19 trillion miles outside of this, extending from itself outward, which is, it's only part of the solar system that would even encompass. You understand? This is how much impact and effect that it's having, as I say. And it's I'm not saying it's a small sun, but it's relatively small. For example, when you compare it to the stars in Orion, for example. You understand what I'm saying? So, that is a serious amount of power that's being exerted there. 27. Its pull upon the Earth, as we see it, is immense. We can understand why. Also affecting Earth is the gravity of other planets in the solar system. We just talked about that. 28. Each of these exerts an attraction which tends to draw the planet out of its regular orbit around the sun. 29. The planets are of different sizes and revolve around the sun at different speeds. The combined gravitational influence, they are able to exert changes over time in complex but predictable ways, and the orbit changes its shape constantly in response. 30. Since the orbit is an ellipse, these changes affect its degree of elongation or eccentricity. This varies from low value close to 0, when the orbit approaches the form of a perfect circle, to a high value of about 6% when it is at its most elongated and elliptical. So this animation here, animation here, I think shows that perfectly for us, doesn't it? Do you understand? So you've got obviously almost, to a lesser extreme, do you understand, a lower sense of eccentricity, a lower number here, to a more extreme number here, showing the orbit obviously around the planet. And we can see here, as I say, that pull, you understand, not only is it affecting precession change, but as you can see, it's affecting the orbit of the planet as well around the sun. Now, this again is another interesting one that it talks about here on, verses 31 through 34 here, which, as it's saying here, is it's not understood by modern day astronomy. Do you understand? So not understood is the fact that, as we can see from this diagram, how many different types of energy changes even just take place just within the atmosphere surrounding the planet. Now, clearly the planet is shielded because it has its own what they call the magnetosphere. So it has a magnetic shield, or almost erratic style shell like we have. Our aura extends up to 12 feet outside the human body. So we have our own atmosphere too. Understood? That's why when people step close into something, you feel them before they don't have to physically touch you for you to know sometimes that their presence is in and around you, because they've stepped into your atmosphere. Now, the planet Earth's magnetosphere shields us from the tremendous emissions that are coming from the sun. Understood? And so obviously all of these different spheres or layers in that regard shield us, so we only basically receive about 1% of the sun's heat energy, just needed to obviously warm the oceans. This obviously helps to create, as well as the moon, but it helps to create different weather systems on the planet. So only 1% of the emissions from the sun we need. Anything more than that, potentially curtains for certain types of life forms here on the planet. So to get that perfect balance, you can see it's shielded. But what this is talking about here is an energy connection that connects both the planets and the sun, which is not very well understood, as I say, when we're dealing with modern day astrological astrophysical theories. It's talking about here. So let's walk through it. So 31 says there are other forms of planetary influence too. 32, as known, shortwave radio frequencies are disturbed when the planet Jupiter, Kisha, Saturn, Anshar, and Mars, Lahmu, line up. So this is talking about planetary alignment. So here, obviously, shortwave radio frequencies, we know obviously every 10 years you get these bursts of solar energy as well from the sun, and that can knock out any satellite systems and different things on the planet Earth, and they're intensifying, they're becoming worse. It's a serious issue because it affects the electromagnetic spectrum. So again, we're seeing here about planets interfering with the movement of certain energy particles here on planet Earth. Now 33, and this connection in this connection, evidence has also become known of strange and unexpected correlation between the positions of Jupiter, Kisha, or Kas, Asar, Neb, so you're getting the Egyptian terminology here for the planets, Saturn, Anshar, or Kashtar, Asar, Mars, Lahmu, or Ka'a, Hara, Reye, or Parfustat, and their orbits around Pa'h or Utu or Shamash, and the violent electrical disturbances in the Earth's upper atmosphere. 34. This would seem to indicate that the planets and the sun share in a cosmic electrical balance mechanism that extends a billion miles from the center of this solar system, Such an electrical balance is not accounted for in current astrological theories, yet exists and is very real. You understand? So this is what we're obviously trying to express in this particular diagram here. Different types of energies here. So they're sharing this balance. So there's a lot of energy moving around that I suppose in a certain point is for us to understand and in some instances be able to take advantage of, which is what our culture, certainly in ancient Kadem Muhammad, or Mahmat, understood very well in ancient Egypt. You understand how to make use, how to account for, and using it to power not only we understand obviously biological systems, but our things that we have within our society. Understood? So a lot of those secrets obviously have been kept masked up clearly for the day and time that we're in now, for it to be revealed back to their true posterity or descendants. So these are the records of the clock of true time. The obliquity of the ecliptic varies from 22 to 24 degrees over a cycle of 50,000 years. You should know what these terms mean now. 36. The sign of the times is seen by these movements and would presage the final destruction of the rule of Isfat or evil. So these are all making reference to the fact that this is the end of their time. Excuse me, as we said, we're moving from that age of, or moved, I should say, from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, in a sense, or water, to the era of ether, known as the age of Tar, as I say, other names, age of Sirius, or even age of Phoenix is another term for this shift in age. When they say end of the world, you understand that even in the biblical books where that was making reference to, it wasn't talking about the end of the world. It's the word being used in Greek was eon, and it means age, and this is what it's making reference to. Yeah, the end of an age, as we're shifting now into this new cycle. You understand? Obviously, from 2,000 years ago now into now. Now it says all the planet Earth inherits will be consigned to flame when the 5 planets assemble in Khafreye, Scarab, Cancer. So arranged in one row that a straight line may pass through its spheres. So we're talking about this planetary alignment. Obviously, we know about the one May 5th, 2000 being touched upon there. Now, interesting enough, it talks about Khafre. And so, again, in our culture, we see things that maybe we wasn't paying fully attention to, or we've seen it and maybe didn't understand. And so, obviously, who is Khafre, or Khafreye? And even here on this diagram, you see Khafreye showing in the diagram emerging out of Amun. So what's the symbolism behind this particular deity, and what does that mean? So let's show a short video to understand. Okay, well, they've put this, you can see the beetle there on his head, isn't it? You see what I'm saying? Put a beetle there on his head. So what does all this mean? Why have they used that particular symbolism? What are they specifically trying to convey there? So let's take a short look at this quick video.
And now, let us praise the humble dung beetle. In ancient Egypt, what we now know as the dung beetle, they called it a scarab, was worshipped. The ancient Egyptians believed that the scarab was a god that rolled the sun across the sky and buried it each evening, where it emerged the next morning, born anew. Today, you're much more likely to hear TV comics joking about dung beetles than find entire countries worshiping them. This is an outrage. Why? Because dung beetles are outstanding planetary citizens, performing a vital function. Dung is produced by animals we rely on for food, like cows. Without dung beetles, there'd be a lot more dung. Millions and millions of tons more. And that would mean a few billion more flies. Dung beetles like these in Africa put their heads down, their bottoms up, and use their super strong front legs to roll away this dung, help deal with the fly problem, and recycle the dung for a positive purpose. Male and female dung beetles work together to assemble a suitable dung ball as the centerpiece of their new home. One beetle burrows under the earth to help the dung ball settle in. This aerates the soil and helps the nutrients in the dung ball nourish the earth. Once the dung ball is settled in, the female lays her eggs in the new burrow. When the eggs hatch, they feed on the dung and prepare to begin this valuable renewal of the earth all over again. Dung beetles have been around for 50 million years, with 7,000 species worldwide, all united in their love of and need to possess balls of dung. One question about dung beetles for further study: are they capable of having fun? You know, being frivolous? We're not privy to the thought process of dung beetles. However, watch this sequence and decide for yourself. Now, we all know what fun it is to go to a theme park and take some wild ride that makes us feel like we're out of control. Is this the dung beetle version of this same giddy urge? No safety harness, no crash helmet? Whoa, that was wicked cool. The humble dung beetle. Because of it, we live in a better, less smelly world.
So you see the dung beetle there. Now, obviously, the dung beetle was for the scarab, I should say, was thought to push the sun. At one time, it was thought to push the sun across the sky. And obviously, looking at the video, and you're seeing about you can see why or how that symbolism came around or about. Now, the word Khafre means Khafre means the transformational power of Re. I'm going to explore that a bit more in part 3. But you can see they put the beetle on his head. Understood? So this is showing you that this is a mental transformation. Understood? In this regard, required for this day and time. So if we overlay and we say, okay, Atum, right knowledge, right wisdom, and then right understanding, understood, you can see that there's a transformation obviously necessary or taking place, because it's the mental obviously that is being affected, or that's where that, at least the start of that transformation is taking place. Remember, the feminine forces of 9 ether or Wu-Sabat, understood, what does it affect first? It affects the minds of the posterity, understood? Yes, so it affects the mind of the descendants first. So the mind has to be corrected. Nothing can be done right unless the mind is right, isn't it? Right thinking leads to right actions, understood? So we have these stages, understand? Yes, right wisdom, right knowledge, and right understanding, obviously leading to right overstanding, leading to sound right reasoning. You understand? So we've got these shifts or these transformations, which Khafre obviously is symbolizing in a number of different events, which are lining up at the end of the 24,000 year cycle, understood, which are bringing about this mental change or realignment of us, clearly coming out of that 400-year kidnapping in the larger cycle of the last 6,000 years of ignorance that we've been in, where we now need to transform mentally to come back into power once again. So it's interesting that we see here from what's been referred to as Anunre, the black sun, Understand? The Khafre is being, I suppose, birthed out of that, in the sense, or is the first symbol of that transformation. In the sense, here, 19 years from 1970, incoming to 1992 into 93, which is when right knowledge came in. You understand? So you think about the type of books that have been released. It was the right knowledge series, right knowledge, mythology, our true roots, breaking the spell, understood. Yeah, so that was this starting to, even back then, trying to remove us from those religious degrees and move us now into right knowledge. Now, even though we stayed in those monotheistic religions, obviously seeking to master them into some degree, because you need to have understanding of the first 3 degrees, understood? And so Judaism, Christianity, Islam, so to speak. For those of us, obviously, who had been indoctrinated, by those particular religions. So that was so Egypt was always being fed to us by the master teacher, and that's why it's called the master teacher, because it was a method of removing, as I say, the spell that we were under at that time, and so in line with changes that were taking place in natural nature. Understood? So let's move through and continue with these verses. So 38, a conjunction of 5 planets that can be expected to have profound gravitational effect. We understand a bit more now, because of the Earth's central sun of 600 miles in diameter, and it already started that date, 1993, to May 5th, 2000 to 2003 AD, when Neptune, Uranus, Venus, Mercury, and Mars align with the planet Earth. May 5th, 2000 AD, on the other side of the sun, setting up some kind of cosmic tug of war. Understood? So again, we're seeing these shifts and changes here being described in this diagram. So they're physically taking place, but then that is also mirroring what the master was guiding to take place on Earth. So as above, so below. Understood? And as that the temple of the sun and moon, that was our link, isn't it, between us and our higher ancestors, Parnatharu, also known as the Murzaku, the providers. So that's why they show you the kind of, I think we showed this before, they call it the man of the hour, understood? And they show that hourglass, because you're getting the Parnatharu, but then they've got the cupped, or the center point, isn't it? Who is that communicative force between them and us, understood? Where they've obviously manipulated the not only the birth of the individual, but also when the individual was being grown as a kid, coming in and manipulating his genes to be able to in-house these etheric beings to convey the information necessary for us in this day and time. So yes, a unique individual, but also an example for us to aspire to show us what we're supposed to be transforming into. Understood? So it says 39, also note a 5th sun, calculate that there will be a most peculiar arrangement of planets at this time, December 21st, 2012 AD. So interesting, that terminology of 5th sun. So that's basically a Mayan term, which is talking about, 4 worlds preceding this one. So the 5th world would be, I suppose, the day and time that we're transitioning into. We have a similar thing, obviously, in relation to our culture. I suppose if you take it from, we gave the Mayans their time system to record precession change, along with giving it to the Olmecs and other certain entities on the planet. But we can see that example here. So you got the 4 worlds, those 4 worlds of 6,000 years, isn't it? And then the moving into the new cycle, understood? Which is the 5th. So that's what they're basically, the 5th sun is making reference to. But the Mayans have a similar type of measurement that you're seeing here. So the 4 cycle up there, got 24,000 as the 4 cycles. Remember, we're coming to the end, so we're at the end of 4 of those. 4 24s, as we've seen before, equals 96,000. So it's where the 9 and the 6 obviously clash. 96,000. Yeah, so mental or mind, must dominate body. And so this is how we're transitioning, becoming more mental than physical. Yeah, so mind must dominate body in this shift which is taking place right now. So I'll talk about a little bit more about that shift change and the impact of that. But it says the peculiar arrangement. So it can occur once in 50,000 years, twice of 24,000 to 26,000 years for precession of the equinox. This alignment is Earth, Sun, and the center of the galaxy. From this extraordinary pattern, expect an extraordinary effect from 2003 AD to 2010 AD, 2011 AD, 2012, and 2013. And it will start AD, and it will start weather changes and nature at work on both Earth, sea, and even the skies and minds of humans. Self-destruction in all forms in this planet now. So obviously this was written some time ago. We're in this scenario or situation right now. Now let's look at this again and some of the symbolism here in a bit more detail. So, precession change 2012. So basically, we should understand by now, because we've kind of been going over it a lot, we should understand by now that if basically the axis, depending on the direction of the access point, would it have an impact on the type of energy that receives a planet? Now, depending on where the axis is pointing, is it going to have an impact on not on the energy that the planet receives, but is going to impact the beings and life forms here on the planet Earth? Well, according to ancient records, the answer is yes. Now, obviously, what happens is with precession change, you've got this 26,000 year cycle and precession of the equinoxes. Let me be clear about that. So this larger cycle that we're reading about here. So here you see it mentioning that obviously it's occurring, obviously twice in a 50,000 year cycle, and we can expect it to have a significant effect during these particular years. Now, let's go back to where we were. So basically, I think we've gone through this before, but just to quickly cover it again will be useful, I think. So we see here that every 12 to 13,000 years, what happens is that you've got this Yaanuwn ray or this solar plexus, and certain events within that 26,000 year cycle, so about every 12 to 13,000. What happens is that we start to get energy in a sort of double helix form. So it's like a double helix, not a double helix, but it's like a double helix. Starts to emanate from the solar plex or Yaanuwn ray point, which is female, and basically pulses back and forth between the surface of the planet, which is male, as Geb. You understand? Or Gibab, or even Sabab, if you're updating the terminology to current standards. Now, so a back and forth is taking place between male and female, which obviously reaches a certain apex. Gibab, surface, Yaanuwn ray, female, from there. So this event, as I say, culminates because what's happening is that the axis of the planet in that regard. So if you imagine in that 26,000 year cycle, the axis of the planet at certain points is going to point away from the center of the galaxy, and certain points is going to point towards the center of the galaxy. Understood? Yes. So let's just go back a couple of things so you can just see better what I'm making reference to. So we've got our orbit around the sun, do you understand? And we've got our sort of axis here pointing. But at a certain point, remember this, in the precession change of the equinox, the solar system is also making an elliptical orbit around the center of the galaxy where there is a massive black hole. Understood? And so as a result of that, this axis is either going to point towards this black hole or it's pointing away from the black hole. Yeah, so it's pointing either towards it, imagine here, or it's pointing away. If you imagine it's not this orbit, but on a bigger scale. Yeah, so solar system around the center of the galaxy. So when it hits the halfway point, so if you imagine every 12 to 13,000 years of a 26,000 orbit, I'm just using this example, this is a yearly annual orbit from something else. But if you imagine that 26,000 year, precessional movement that's taking place, yes, it's also going through an elliptical orbit, as I say, because of the movement of the solar system. So it's not all, so at a certain point, if you think about this is 26,000 years, your halfway point, isn't it, is 12 to 13,000, isn't it? Yeah? Halfway point is 12 to 13,000. So if you imagine the whole of it is 26, halfway is going to be 12 to 13, yes? Halfway. Here, at this point, is going to be 6 to, you know what I mean? Yeah, 5 to 6,000 or whatever. So 6,000 years is a halfway point at this point. So imagine, if we look at this diagram, it's pointing, and we imagine that this is, we replace the sun here, and we imagine that this is that black hole at the center of the galaxy. At this point, it's pointing away from the center of the galaxy, correct? At this point, it's pointing towards the center of the galaxy. At these points here, there's going to be a change, isn't it, at 6,000? Because it's going to start to point to change direction, isn't it? Do you understand? From when it was previously pointing towards to pointing away at the midpoint. So what you're coming to in 21 December 12, symbolically, you understand, is starting to change direction, yes, between what it was previously in the last cycle, pointing away from the center of the galaxy, to now starting to move towards this position here, where it's pointing towards the center of the galaxy. Now, so we're symbolically at this point where it's starting now to make that change, and so therefore it will take up to 6,000 years for it to be in that position where it's fully pointing towards. Do you understand? Yeah, so that's what that shift represents. And so what happens is on the planet Earth, is what we're reading about here at these points, is that basically this double helix type energy starts to emanate from the center of the planet, get pulsing back and forth. Do you understand? Which is what's taking place there. And so, and the location where that pulsing is, or where it's hitting the planet, is at a specific location. You understand? And it was previously in Arabia. Understood? And of what would be described as a male type energy. Do you understand? So obviously, male energy has been dominating, isn't it? And so that shift that is taking place is changing that energy from male orientated to put the woman back into power. So this is a shift that is happening and affects us as Nagaru on Negroids, understood, as a result of that. Understand? So the shift or that energy point changes every 12 to 13,000 years in terms of its location on the planet. Understood? So it's moving from Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, as they classify it, to Africa. Yes, so that's what's happening, or what took place right now. You understand? So it's moving from obviously this male energy, which is kebab, and we're just using it to show male, now towards Africa as that feminine energy now of that pulsing back and forth. So it reaches an apex, understood, in that male and female, you know what I mean, back and forth or whatever, and basically it changes what the definition of spirituality means. Yeah, when this shift happens, it changes it. You understand? So it gets designed, reimagined to be in sync with what the next evolutionary cycle is. So in this regard, we're going back to factual information as the new, I suppose, spirituality in this day and time when the shift happens. So effectively, the Earth, not to make it too crass, but it is going through an orgasm. You understand? Because you've got this pulsing back and forth, and that it goes through an orgasm, and basically is one of the reasons why everybody's getting so spiritual all of a sudden. I mean, who am I? I mean, find out my ancestry, so on and so forth, because that's a shift that takes place as a result of this event that we're describing as precession of the equinoxes. Understood? Yes, and this pulsing is back and forth. The closer individuals are to the center of where that energy is intersecting with the surface of the planet, the more you feel the impacts of it, obviously, as us as Nagaru. Now, remember, in emotional energy, it says that the Nuwapian or Sabian now is analogous to the way air is the carrier of sound. So there's even with ourselves, there's a interconnected network, obviously, of how we're connected to each other. And so we're feeling the impact of it, some more than others, because they're closer to where, as I say, that point of shift has taken place, and it will last there for the next, let's say, 12 to 13,000 years. And as I say, that is symbolizing that shift now towards the center of the galaxy, where there's a massive black hole. Yeah, you see it here, in terms of that step change. Now, where the confusion can come in is because 2012 is not the actual date. It's just it's a mathematical date, and it's symbolic. So there's symbolism in the number. Understood? So obviously we understand that we're not third rock from the sun, but our ancestors recounted from the outside in. So this is the sixth planet, Earth, from outside in, tying into, as you see on the screen there, the 6,000-year rule of the Adamite race. In that regard, they've given 6,000-year rule. Depending on whose calendar you use, Jews have their own calendar, 3761 BCE, understood, as the birth of their Adam, the red and ruddy one, understood, and so they're given a 6,000-year rule. The planet's weight, as we discussed earlier, is 6 sextillion tons. That's 6 and 21 zeros. So we've got our 6,000 years. Yeah, 6 is sex, as what the number symbolizes. The 2-1 obviously is dealing with the weight of the planet. Understood? So you could say the 2-1, which is the 21, or say 12 if you read it backwards, depending on how you're reading it. Obviously, you got 21 zeros for 6 sextillion tons. So 2012 is really, in time period, it's 6,012 HA in terms of hereafter. So the numbers are symbolic of the actual planet itself and the shift that is taking place. 2012, as the actual event of that awakening, happened in between 2002 and 2003. It already took place. Yeah, so when anybody was jumping up and down, as you know, 2012, end of the world, which is shifting era, is that in change. the event of that awakening, that pulsing of the planet, and the shift of that location from the Middle East over to Africa already took place. You understand? Which tied into that planetary, like May 8th, 2000 and May 5th, 2002. But obviously, which is because of that apex and that shift that's taking place, they put the master, or took the master off the streets and away from his people. You know, because certain rituals were supposed to take place on the land to aid our transformation. Understood? So the date is symbolic. Reason why it talks from 9 to 2012 is because that is the shift or the energy that we're seeing in the rise back to female rulership. But the awakening or the awareness of the event happened before, which is that pulsing back and forth that we see, which is why, as I say, you're getting that they call New Age, they call it New Age and New Age Revolution, that type of system, because it's that awareness is being triggered by that act, which is why I remember, as is explaining in the book, importance obviously of the female orgasm, because orgasms raise a person's spiritual powers, because obviously you're lighting up or you're connecting certain energy centers in this from the base of the spinal column upwards. Understood? Some refer to it as Jacob's ladder, do you understand? In that regard. So you're opening up certain portals to be able to process different types of energy. So you're lighting up, almost in a sense, your spinal column. And that happens through the sexual process. So obviously, remember, religion suppressed the female sexual powers because their deity did not want God. Their deity did not want females to experience sexual pleasure. Understood? So you see the male-orientated way in which even the information around sex is kind of male-dominated, and women have basically made themselves subservient to that through monotheistic religion. So, as you know, or some people may know, or some people may not know, I'm saying people obviously experience orgasms. Their perception of the wider environment around them enhances. Yeah, and so, even though the act may not feel always that spiritual, but it does. So the stereotype is not a monotype, is that males fall asleep straight after sex, women are awake after, and basically feel that heightened awareness, heightened spirituality at that particular point. You understand? However long not only the orgasm lasts, but the sort of after effects as well. You understand? There's certain thinking that arises from that. So males will experience the same thing if they stay awake. You understand? So this is for both of us. It's a way, as I say, to enhance one's spiritual powers by paying attention, understood, to what's taking place after the act is happening, because you're in sync, as I say, with the wider universe, as some may describe it. Understood. So, and even you can see, I think I'm showing the diagram here at the bottom, even they are saying, the Earth is 6 sextillion tons. Here you see it's saying kilograms, but 1 ton is 1,000 kilograms. So you take off 3 zeros here, then you get the same 21. Understood? So it's symbolic of the effect, obviously, of the planet here. This is where the geometry comes in, because geometry is dealing with Earth measures, understood, and its relation clearly to this planet as we see at the moment. Now, there are other things going on in this diagram which are quite interesting. So you see precession change there. And then when we go to the center, we see that when we talk about 9 to the 9th power of 9, interesting enough, you see that the Master Teacher in Lost Record of Time, we'll probably go over this in some detail, but just for this point here, we've got this grid, understood, And in the center of this grid is the center of the galaxy, where this is massive black hole. So when we are talking about the relativity of us, we're talking about this central point where obviously there's a tremendous amount of energy being drawn in or taken in by this black hole, which obviously links to other universes. You understand? Yeah? And you get black holes when the rims of two universes touch together. And interesting enough, we look at the symbol here. It's showing you our numerical rakumat, you understand, or rakum, excuse me, the number for 9, the symbol of it. Yeah. So here, a bit difficult to see, but it's showing that our symbol for the number 9 there. So that's what 9 to 9 power is alluding to, is this black hole at the center of the galaxy, yeah, which, as I say, is having an impact on what's taking place here on the planet Earth, and is triggering certain events. Understood? Now, when we look at this symbol, we see here, as we talked about, that shift is happening, not only females rising to power, but where we're becoming more mental than physical. Yeah, so mind must dominate the body. Now, in the old religious symbols here, you see that, I think back in the day, they used to show the major prophets, isn't it? Yeah, for those who were around at that time as answers and different things. So you show the major prophets here. And then of the Bible, and then I think the crescent here, they have Muhammad's name in there, if memory serves me correctly. So obviously this was religious symbolism, but we were being conveyed, what was being conveyed here was really an Egyptian symbol. Understood? Now, what these really mean in terms of what they make reference to, obviously, is the inner kingdom of human beings, and they symbolize basically, so if you think about, you count the 6 exterior points, correct, and the 6 interior points here, so you've got a hexagon in the middle, and then we've got our 6 external points, so that's 12, isn't it? There's 12 points there, and we've got this 13th point here. Yeah, now the 12 is really 24, understood, because obviously what it ties into is the 12 cranial points within the human body, yeah, which is what's allowing your brain to communicate with every aspect of your body, obviously in a conscious as well as subconscious way. Yeah, so we've got 12 pairs of cranial nerves, which gives us our 24 once again. Now, when you look at the symbol here, this doesn't make sense, does it? Because this symbol is a star, yeah, which is a sun, correct? And this is symbolic of the what? The moon, yes? So the moon is much smaller than the sun, yeah? In fact, we put that number up there to show you that you can fit the moon inside of the sun 64.3 million times. Yeah, so this symbol, or as they show you, the symbol of Islam, for example, it's got the star and the crescent. It's not correct. Yeah, because the sun's much bigger than the moon. How can the crescent encompass the moon? The star, excuse me, the sun. Yeah, so these symbols are used, in fact, all over religion, isn't it, as a sun. So Jewish 6-point star, sun. Yeah, you get the sun on the cross, a circle with the cross is the sun, obviously, as it appears to set. And in Islam, we see again these astronomical bodies being used in their symbols as the sun and the crescent, sun and the moon. Understood. So, and this was even given to us as ansars. You flip it around the other direction, then you see the ansars used to wear the ring, isn't it, of a 6-pointed star and crescent. Some people still emotionally linked to it and even still wear it today. Understood? Yes, but it symbolizes, as I say, these 24 or 12 pairs or 24 cranial nerves. And what does this symbolize here? Okay, well, it symbolizes, so this is making reference not to the sun, which is 93 million miles away, but the etheric sun. Yeah, the etheric sun within the individual person, the etheric sun, which is making reference to, hence the sizing issues. But this is not a crescent moon. This is dealing with the third eye in the human body as the pineal gland. And this is dealing with those 12 cranial nerves as we touched upon earlier. Yeah, so these cranial nerves that we see there, 24 in number, yeah, because they come in pairs. Understood. Now, whose symbol was that? Well, what the master teacher was introducing us to by bringing us to that symbol, and you see it in even our early symbols, but the sun and the moon, who's that tied into? Well, it ties us back into Tahuti. Yeah, so we can see the same symbol here on the sun, and what do we see here? The moon as a symbol of Tahuti with the baboon. Understood? Let me see, there's Tahuti there. Excuse me, as the sun and the moon. So that's tying you to 6-pointed star and crescent. This is what it's tied. So all of it leading itself back to who was teaching us, the signature, and then tying it back into, so you know who's coming, who's speaking, what the purpose of this individual is. You understand? In the renewal of our cycles, because Tahuti is the one who is known to have created time systems and, you understand, recorded, understood, the cycles of Sajalat, or kept these records, understood, and was always there in the story, if you remember, to aid Hara or Horus in his battle against Set or Satuk's attack. You understand? Yeah, as that being there. So he was always giving us Egypt, even in those monotheistic religious degrees that we see there. Yeah. So very important symbolism there. And so as you see the crescent above, because as we said, it's now mind, that shift that's taking place is mind over body. Understood? So this is what you're seeking now in striving for perfection, in seeking to transform. We are developing the mental, having mastery over the physical, controlling our lust, different things, etc. You understand? Yeah, as those points to aid our transformation back into, as children of the Natharu, to transform back into Natharu. Now, let me just step out for a second. So this procession change is significant, you understand, in terms of its effect on us as Nagaru or Negroids, you understand? Now, it would have been a completely different story if the master was out. So we don't know the impacts of what would have been possible, you understand, had we been left alone to align ourselves and spiritually prepared to connect with our ancestors at these appropriate dates. So we find ourselves once again in survival mode now, against the nature's clock, in the sense, so to speak, because certain events have taken place which we've not been able to optimize and benefit from fully for full restoration. So if you think about it, as I've said to you before in these classes, many don't know the value of a soul. They don't know the value of soul energy. So they don't know what someone else who does know the value will be prepared to do to either manipulate, to get that energy, or to destroy those who have them. You understand? Because in their mind, they believe that, well, our destruction means that their reign or rule can be longer, because they're like a king who doesn't want to step off of the throne in that regard. Now, let's kick it in a bit further. Any questions?
There are no questions and no hand raises.
So Anunre can be considered to be, or certainly tied, and one of the ways it's tied is it representing that center of the galaxy there. Yes, I'm sorry, I missed that. So basically, so you see the importance of Tahuti, you understand, or this Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn as that master teacher, where everything you're being given, the level of detail, it all ties back in, comes back around. You understand? You were giving it up at a certain point. Now you're being raised, which is a term referred to as cyclical evolution. Understood? Yeah. So linear progression. We're moving away from linear progression to cyclical evolution, where you're being given things. You understand? And then what happens is, because you're rotating around it in a circle, but the next circle is above the one that you were previously on, you understand, you're being given it in a higher level. You understand? To what it really alludes to, what it really means, finding out who you really are. Now, it's a bit old, so it probably needs updating, but a useful page in the Holy Tablet, so you have to sort of not ignore, but some of the terminology is a bit old, it needs updating. But it's a useful one for overstanding in this context. So it says the planes, 160, the plane of divine, it's Holy Tablets, chapter 7, tablet 1, living soul. It says 160, the plane of divine truth. 161 is the plane of spiritual perfection and attainment. 162, the plane exempt from all carnal desires. So we are striving for perfection, tatmum, in terms of that concept. 163, supreme spiritual bliss. 164, it is the level of consciousness. 165, which in daily expressions those you call the ranks of angelic beings. And here it goes through all the different 24 elders. So those 24 elders in us is telling you it's the level of consciousness. In us, this is what it's expressing here. I won't go through all the names. We'll jump in. It says 170, the 24th seat is open to all news bearers. And 171, and the 25th is one of the 24 who takes the seat of the overseer. I think in the previous session, we read something when we were talking about Yaanuwn and Yaanuwn Tat, which basically, I think it was in there. Maybe I didn't read it out, but it was the same thing. So if you imagine these 24 seats around the wheel, and then at the end of the cycle, the 19th, and the 25th is in the center. The 19th becomes that 25th seat, do you understand? Which is basically in the middle, in the center, as the representative here on Earth, obviously to inform and show us or provide us with the necessary guidance through that transformation. So 172, as the 19th becomes the 25th in the renewal of history, as Yaanuwn becomes Melchizedek, which takes place every equinox. When Yaanuwn personified in the year 1970 into Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, called then Imam Isa, he descended on the planet Earth and he took place of the 25th seat, and another Anunnaki, I say the terms are old here, placed in the 19th seat. 173, the nearness to the heart of Anu el-Elah, most glorified and exalted. It is the school of the Anunnaki, of the green light, from where they have the ability to personify as 12 times 12, which is 144. Correct? 144. We'll leave that for the moment. 175, which equals 9, but there's something else in there which we'll leave for now. 175, and it is here that one is translated from the mental state into that divine state. The mental plane is the plane of the chosen. 177, rejoice at the glad tidings. 178, the chosen one, our master, has found the root of all evil disagreeableness. 179, yes, he has shown us the way of salvation, Nawabu, or today now, Wu-Sabat. 180, the chosen one dispels the illusions of the mind. He breaks the spell of Kingu. Yes, so the spell of Kingu, the spell of religion, the spell of Imam in ancient Egypt, not being able, amnesia, and then the spell of Leviathan is a spell of money, or love of money. 181, and redeems us from the fears of death. So remember, you have been given and schooled now into what takes place, what is life, so that you understand what take place, or prepared for what takes place at death, and connecting with your ancestors while you are living. Understood? Not to take fear of death to be caught up, as I say. Potentially, the energy of your soul ends up in lower etheric realms to be used as batteries by lower forces. Now, 182, the chosen one, our master, brings comfort to the weary and sorrow laden. He restores peace to those who are broken down under the burdens of this life. 184, he gives courage to the weak where they are at time's end, and they are ready to give up on self-reliance. So this is the issue, isn't it? Yeah, that no one wants to build anymore. Yeah, this is a challenge. No one wants to build anymore. Everyone wants to come in, and it's all done already. Understood? Yeah. So this is the challenge. You find very few, even in this day and time now, even with all the information that's been given, all of even wealth that's coming to our people. Still find ourselves in difficult conditions, but wealth is coming our way in certain instances, and people still want to, contribute to the system which has been designed to work against us, rather than to build our own. Do you understand? When Master's talking about give them back their stuff, we still want to mix and blend the two things. Now, obviously, we should be working to work our way out, because ultimately, as a race, our self-reliance means that there's a link between us and nature, no one else in between. Do you understand? Which is what we find ourselves certainly here in the Western Hemisphere. So we need to move back to be able to stand, of course, on our own 2 feet, as a part of and under that sun 93 million miles away. Now 185 says, and they hope the chosen one has proclaimed the truth. Yeah, Wu-Sabat. Now 186, let the truth of the chosen one dwell in your hearts. 187, extinguish in yourselves every desire that antagonizes the chosen one. 188, and in the perfection of your spiritual growth you will become like unto him. 189, those of you here which cannot and will not develop into the chosen one must perish. So the Amun Nabab Arei Akhakta obviously is the standard set by that Nafaru, and it's what one must seek to attain, isn't it? Now that's your visible standard, that's your example, understood, that you're seeking to get to or attain spiritually, because that's the marker that the ancestors have set for our you understand, our development, our evolution, for the day and time we're in. Understood? So it's the marker that's set. Listen to the next verse. For it is the source of your error, and it is the cause of your misery. Yeah, 191. It is those of you who, through flashes of intuitive illumination from a higher source, have the ability to perceive that which the ordinary human perceives not. 193. The chosen is one that finds his normal consciousness level. Understood? So this is that importance there, yeah, of your state of perfection for you. But yeah, we have to understand who our genes are, who we are. So when we read Master Secret number 3, which we were going, is of our is, you understand, you find out that level is quite high in terms of consciousness level. Yeah, there is no existence without us, because we are of Is. You understand? So that level is quite high, and as we've expressed in this class before, because we vibrate fully up to from 1 to the 9th plane of existence, whatever standards we are living by is the highest standards. That all races basically, or we have the capability to set those standards for all races, but we will achieve the highest of those standards because we vibrate up the full scale. You understand? So it's time to stop twerking. You understand? I mean, it's time to not stop twerking if you like twerking, but twerking can't be that level of influence in the world. Yeah, we can't twerk our way to these higher states of existence. We're supposed to be setting the standard for the world. Yeah, because no one can attain any higher state of living other than us based on our melanin content, because we vibrate, and obviously the fact that we've got active pineal gland, we vibrate up the whole of the scale. So the highest our ability to exist and live in those highest level, that is the highest standard can be set for any human being in existence anywhere. Yeah? So this is a little bit older, so it's to me the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek, but you understand, we'll pass through that and look between. So saying the plane is the midway plane between the human being and the supreme being, where all those of the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek spiritually meet, where they adorn crimson to black crown, and you listen to their tassel belt of happiness and sound, where their heart is wrapped in a noble sash, a token of authority, dignity, power, honor, and reward, worn as a symbol of glory and remembrance of their great path. As they raise in height from degree to degree, 720 is what they will be. 360 master the physical, and all 360 opens the way to the spiritual hall. 27, 9 to 9th power of 9. Interesting, yeah? 9 to 9th power of 9, we just saw about that, yeah? At this point, you become master over what? Space and time. Knowing no depth and no height, you are raised from the darkness of ignorance to intellect, light which endures all temptation when he is tried, a crown that is of his own. The jacket with the wings of an angel is worn. Thus you have the inner pyramid, Pyra, means fire, middle, means center, 197. The nose on the face inhales oxygen, which ignites the sun in the middle of your chest, where the lotus breastplate rests. And the son of the Anunnaki, or plant of Daru in this regard, most glorified and exalted, Malakut, which is ruled by Malachi Z, the plane of divine love, 201, a comprehension not yet a compassion, not yet comprehended by human beings, but it will be. 202, of which earthly love is only a reflection. 203, a compassion that realizes not only the self. 204, but expresses a compassion which can encompass all. Understood? Yeah, the service, thinking of other people, service to others. I mean, true divine love. Yeah, most of us, when you really analyze even Man from Planet Risk and certain books, and you look at Who Lived Before the Adam and Eve story, some of the Supreme Mathematics series, and you look at the description of human beings, one of the characteristics is very selfish. Very selfish in comparison to whoever, but one of the characteristics is very selfish, self-centered. Yeah? So these traits need to change. So you can see whether it's what may be considered the pre-hereafter doctrine, hereafter doctrine, now into the thereafter doctrine, post-2012, how it all ties in together. You understand? I mean, you got to think about the mind of a being capable of planting seeds in 1970, thousands and thousands of words and different connective parts, understood? And still coming back to link everything into what was truly to be given to us in this day and time. I mean, it's quite simply incredible the way things tie up, in Wu-Sabat. And it's not trying to trick you, it's trying to aid you in your transformation and your journey. So let's finish off a few of these slides quickly. So it says 41, it cannot It will not and cannot be denied, Musbatu, that multiple influences are already at work within the solar system. So I think we've established that in some great detail. Among the many of these influences that is and will be seen to occur are with this planet and the satellite Ahat, the moon. It is particularly strong. Earthquakes will get or have gotten much stronger and will occur much more often when the moon is new or between the sun and the earth. When the moon crosses the meridian of the affected locality and the moon is closest to the earth on its orbit. 43. When the moon reaches the latter point of its perigee, its gravitational attraction increases by 6%. So here, interesting enough, this orbit is shown quite circular. Sorry, one moment. Right, apologies for that. I'm back. So so here it's saying when the moon is at its closest point in its orbit. So apogee, when it's describing apogee here, is when the moon is at its furthest point in the orbit away from the planet Earth. And then when it talks about perigee, it is talking about where it's at its closest point in relation to the planet Earth. So you can see here the orbit, I mean, it's still quite circular, but it's not quite slightly obviously out of alignment. So when you lose the line here, you can see that, as I say, at a certain point here, it's not quite, it's very circular, but there's still points where it's closest and points where it's farther away. So we can see here, this is being described, the gravitational attraction increases by 6%. Lunar means lunatics in action, insanity, crazy, lust, killings, rape, wars. Death is upon the planet at the end of the rule of 6 ether. Understood? So again, these planetary bodies, obviously this would be referred to as what? Lunar biology. You talk about suns, you would obviously reflect solar biology, So this is really, say, astronomy, star, and from nomia, nomos, law, is the law governing the suns or the stars, obviously within space. But astrology obviously is dealing with sun and obviously how it's affecting personalities and things here on the planet Earth. So the moon is significant in that regard. It says 44, all this and more, 1993 down to 2013. As he fades away, this happens once every 27 1/3 or 27 1/3 days. 45, the tidal pull that exerts on these occasions affects all things and living things. The hour is upon us, not the moment but the time, as each year becomes month to week to day to moment. Understood. So we understand, we explained earlier about the waters of the planet being affected by the position of the moon. It's the moon pulling on the waters of the planet. Now here is another phenomena before we wrap up and close for today that we need to understand as well. So it says all this 46, all this circular motion, of course, generates immense transfugal forces. So, and these cause the planet Earth's crust to bulge outwards from the equator. The corollary is flattening at the poles. The consequence is that the planet deviates slightly from the form of a perfect sphere to an oblate spheroid. 48. Its radius at the equator, 3,963.374 miles, is therefore about 14 miles longer at its polar radius, 3,949 shouldn't have a pound sign there, but 949.92 miles. So 49. For billions of years, the flattened poles and the bulge of the equator have been engaged in a covert mathematical interaction with the recondite influence of gravity. So basically, what's happening is that obviously these forces which are pushing down on the poles within the planet, you can see here, this is the view from above, but it's flattening the planet. So it's not quite a perfect sphere. It's still very round. This is extreme version. But what it's explaining to you there is that basically, as a result, this, because the planet is not spherical, at the equator, so when you go from this point to this point, that's one distance. From this point to this point, however, is 14 miles longer. So if it was a circle, remember everything should be equidistant. Yeah, so from any point on the center to the edge, it should be the same measurement. But as a result of this, the pushing down on the poles, yeah, is squeezing the planet and causing this bulge, is 14 miles longer. I'm not going to say that it should be, but because of this particular phenomena. And so the spheroid shape that's what's being described here. You understand? So in actuality, when you go back to some of the diagrams that we were looking at here, some show that even more accurately today, don't they? Insofar as we might not be paying attention to it directly, but you see, so if you look at this one, for example, they're showing it as a perfect sphere, but then if you look at this one, we can see, yeah, that spheroid shape, yeah, being now reflected in modern diagrams. So, as I say, yeah, just because you see a diagram doesn't make it necessarily accurate. It's just somebody's interpretation of what is taking place. You have to remember that, and then take these things and look at them. That's solid, that's, you know what I mean, true, because it's some diagram, you know what I mean, so they're reflecting different concepts. So this one shows, because this is probably maybe a more modern understanding of that phenomena, what's taking place, and the impact of gravity there pushing down on the planet, you know, versus something like this, which is not reflecting that particular ideology, yeah, on that side. Any questions?
Right, there are no questions.
Okay,
no questions.
So relatively quiet today. Okay, so listen to what it said. 49. For billions of years, the flattened poles and the bulging equator have been engaged in a covert mathematical interaction with the recondite influence of gravity. 50. Because the Earth is flattened, explains one authority that the moon's gravity tends to tilt the Earth's axis so it becomes perpendicular to the moon's orbit, and today to a lesser extent is the same is true for the sun. 51. At the same time, the equatorial bulge, the extra mass distributed around the equator, acts like the rim of a gyroscope, keeping the Earth steady on its axis. 52. So the planet Earth as it revolves and rotates its way around the sun, marks a time, and that time has revealed birth, age, death, and regrowth of living things. 53. This planet lives and is alive. It was born female to give life to living things, and as such has a birth date as well. 54. And when as such she is aging, and with the help of evil mortals, she is now sick and dying. 55. So her time is coming to cure herself of the disease that plagues her. 56. It's time to remove the six evil forces that seeks Earth's destruction. 57. They cause wars, destruction, plagues, famine, droughts, disease, hate, separation of people. He is disease to the planet Earth. It is time to remove him off the planet, and Mother Earth and her soul, nature, is at work. 58. Using her powers first, the sun and the moon, the wind and the waters. 59. She shakes the earth, parts the earth, melts the ice caps, causes earthquakes, tornadoes, whirlwinds, violent storms, volcanoes, landslides, earth opening up, floods, and hurricanes. Just kill off sea creatures, animals, birds, plants and trees, human beings. 61. Our great mother says enough is enough. It's time to remove the devil off the planet Earth and remove their evil forces, ghost, spirit, demons. Their time is up and they will not rule, not even the new land of Canaan. The loss of the evil one's power will be revealed by their replacement as heads of the land. 62. I said before, I give you all that I have, and all which is in my powers to see the evil ones removed out of existence. Forever, I have waited every moment of their 6,000-year rule, and it ended 2000 AD. They faded out without beginning, without ending. You understand? So you can see that the master teacher has been working tirelessly and continues to work tirelessly for this aim and ambition. It's just unfortunate as the same kind or kin or as part of his tribe, we don't seem to have the same will to put the planet straight and set the record straight for the planet and play our part in developing ourselves. Now, but we're understand, but yet obviously Wu-Sabat is having that effect on us to change and to transform. Now let's look in the Holy Tablets just very quickly before we close out. I mean, just a little bit extract. You can go before this if you want to go into more detail. But it's talking about the planet Earth. It says it was always in existence and always active, for it is a living entity. It's talking about the entity with inside what is being called or being classified as the planet Earth. It says one that was made to suit the conditions to exist within the boundless universe. 168. For Gaia is a living entity existing within the all. 169. Gaia has and always will be prosperous, having favorable conditions. 170. Causing the presence of life itself to be thought of as significant. 171. Any species is of course a key development of this living organism called Gaia. 172. Yet because of your existence came along so far after the creation of Gaia, originally called Tiamat. 173. It is inappropriate to question whether life of any species has a significant meaning to why Gaia came about. 174. Know that Gaia is a complex entity involving the Earth's biosphere. 175. It is a self-regulated organism that grows and has climate changes. 176. Gaia is living matter. 177. The air, the oceans, the land and the surface forms this now complex system which has the capacity to keep existing. 178. Why call Earth a planet when its 3/4 of its surface is sea? That's why when pictures are taken of it from above, it appears to be a blue sapphire. 179. Know that water is part of the mechanism that keeps the planet running. 180. It transforms radiant energy from Apsu, that's the sun, into the motion of air, water, which in turn distributes this energy all over Gaia. 181. Gaia runs off cybernetics, which is a self-regulating system of communications and control in living organisms and machines. Thus, the physical part of a being is created. Your jalud skin is the soil of Gaia, a living organism called Earth, and your very essence is soil. So the Earth is alive. It is a being, obviously, that is conscious, makes conscious decisions, thinking, feeling, understood, and how we must get in sync with it, obviously, which is being described here on this page. And we can see, unfortunately, in the news, obviously recently in Haiti, etc., various different changes are taking place around the world, which are becoming more and more acute for the reasons obviously we've outlined in the class today. So you can see the significant, I think, power really of the master teacher in tying certain things up, in preparing us for the day and time we're in, but we're still not ready. Yeah, still not ready, still don't have certain things in place to prepare us for the changes that are coming, which are only going to get more extreme, obviously, as these times unfold. Understood? In that regard. So very important that focus of freeing Dr. York to really give us that next level of guidance to take us where we need to be, because many, as I say, are seeking to delay and cause us to miss these key events, as you've already seen here in time, so that to seek to extend their rule. Understood? As what they're up to, as they're delaying and blocking tactics to stop us or from transforming, because we are destined to rule this planet once again, albeit under female rule. So that's what I wanted to cover in today's class in part 2. I think we've covered now the science of the astronomy of the planets and how time works, etc. So we can now go into in more detail now how the records got lost and the details around the Tulli Papyrus, which we do need to go through a certain story as related to Hatat Sha'eb Tak. Interesting, one of our ancestors, very important in the day and time we're in. So I think we've done a reasonable job of bringing you up to speed in that regard. So now when we fly through some of these details, some of the terminology you should be familiar with and able to understand. Next month's class is going to be the 12th and the 19th, so not the first week, but the 2 middle weeks of the month. So just make note of that, and we will send out a reminder before the time. This class will be out some point over the next week. Any questions? You've been very quiet today. Any questions?
Right, there was no questions. I answered one question. Somebody asked what scroll that was coming from, what book, so I've tagged that.
So it's not a scroll. Sorry, the last bit we were dealing with was from a class, As the World Turns. And if you... As the World Turns... maybe I thought I put the link there. So it's called As the World Turns. It's on the Wu-Sabat. So Wu-Sabat, W-U-S-A-B-A-T. So the Wu-Sabat YouTube channel. So you're looking for a class called As the World Turns. And so that's what we were covering today, reading mainly from. Yeah.
I stand corrected.
Oh, sorry. What did you say? Say something different. Yeah, no problem. But As the World Turns, is what the class was today. Or as the planet turns, not as the world turns, as the planet turns. Any other questions?
No, that is it. It's been quiet on the questions today.
Okay, well, hopefully that means people understood what we're talking about. So in terms of it being clear. But yeah, I'll say this part will be available on the YouTube channel. Check it out, go back through it, look at some of those terminologies again, obliquity, eccentricity, these types of things, so you're familiar with them. You understand? It's useful to know, as the master himself said. You understand? Better to know it and not need it than to need it and not know it. You understand? So there's certain things, as I say, in Wu-Sabat, which are foundation for us to kind of start to master. Not everything is comparing everything to what the white man did, all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That's, I'm not saying it's played out. I'm just saying it's a case of it's our time. So this is the time for you to learn about you and your culture. So, master what it means from our perspective, in our doctrine, because the masters put out so much information. At one time, I think one of our student teachers, a great mentor, or Manthu Hatab, said, you've only got time right now to eat, study, and sleep. You understand? And with that, actually, if you look at the amount of information that's out there, I mean, that statement has a lot of truth inside. It doesn't mean not having no fun, but what it does mean is that the urgency required, if you're really on this transformation journey, the master teacher, even been incarcerated 20 to 20 years, is outworking his students, in a sense, significantly, in a sense, outworking. Yeah, and a lot of people can say they're up on everything that's out, and we need to know this stuff. It's not like, as I say, you can't. As I say, you have to read. You have to be up in your language, be up in your spirituality. You have to be up in your health. You know what I'm saying? For true mastery. I mean, do what you can. I'm not saying run yourself into the ground, so to speak, but one has to prioritize, what it is they're seeking to really achieve out of this life. You know what I'm saying? And I know that's not connected to what we have to do just for survival in his world. You know what I'm saying? But how much hours and energy and effort are you putting into your transformation? One can't truly achieve that unless they're in the service of others. You know what I'm saying? That's something to remember. And certainly if you contemplate the existence of our ancestors like Partakia, 93 million miles away, you slowly start to understand truly what divine love means. You think about the planet and what it goes through and what it provides, you truly start to understand what divine love means. Okay, well, on that basis, a good way to end. So everybody take care. Appreciate you joining us today, and we will see you in approximately 3 weeks' time. As I say, check out the YouTube channel, get up to speed, and hopefully maybe next time we'll have a few more questions. So take care, everybody. Appreciate your time. Stay safe in all that you do.